Hello, everyone, and welcome to the FIDE Women's Candidates Tournament brought to you by Chess.com. My name is Fiona Steil-Anthony, and I'm delighted to be joined by Women International Master Anna-Maja Kazarian. Anna-Maja, it's our first time doing commentary together, and what a game we will be following, the final classical game. How are you feeling today?
Yeah, Fiona, I'm super excited to be commentating with you together today. I'm so excited for today's match because we have seen 3 games between those two players, and today we will see the decision if they will go to tie breaks or if the match ends today. Let's have a look at the bracket. Because we can see there that the players are now tied 1.5 to 1.5. And yeah, I'm curious what is going to happen today. What do you think, Fiona?
Well, I talked about this a little bit with Tatev yesterday, so we were calling game 3. We both thought that very likely we'll see a draw today. I think since the players are now so close, this is the final game. If one player loses, there's no more time for a comeback. It's the last game. So I think risk-taking will really be kept to a minimum. In general, we haven't seen, I think, throughout the first 3 classical games, seen anyone take any major risks.
Mm-hmm.
So I expect, Tan Zhongyi with the white pieces to try to get something risk-free where she can press maybe a little bit, but I don't expect any. I hope for fireworks, but I don't expect any.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, it's the 4th game, and as you said, the 3 classical games have been pretty equal. Nothing too crazy was happening. So I'm also expecting the 4th game to be pretty peaceful, but you never know. Let's have a look at the prize fund of this tournament, everyone, because there's a huge prize fund. There's a total of 250,000 euros, and the winner will go home with 60,000 euros. Second place goes home with 50,000 euros. So if there's a winner today, the winner will at least go home with 50,000 euros. It's quite a stacked prize in Fiona, isn't it?
Absolutely. Very, very decent prize field there. We already know Lei Tingzhe qualified from Pool A, so she's already guaranteed a minimum of 50,000. And today, well, today or tomorrow, we'll find out who goes on to play Lei Tingzhe, and then the winner of that match, of course, will go on to challenge reigning world champion Zhu Wenjun. And finally, before we get to the playing hall, we see for now the players haven't arrived yet. There's still 6 minutes to go until the start. Let's remind our viewers of the match format.
Yeah, so we have an 8-player single elimination bracket knockout, and as you mentioned, the winner plays Wenjun in a World Championship match. Each match is 4 games, first to 2.5 points wins, and the time control is classical time control of 90 minutes and 30 minutes of after 40th move, and 30 seconds of increments every single move. So this game can go on for a long time. The players have plenty of time, but we might see a short draw today. Who knows?
Who knows? The players are, of course, not allowed to offer a draw before move 40.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean they cannot find a repetition somewhere. So we don't know. Yesterday, actually, I think in general, Tan Zhongyi, as we see, I think, as has been the case for the games I saw at least, that Alexandra Goryachkina has arrived first at the board, awaiting Tan Zhongyi. Yesterday, Tan Zhongyi played incredibly fast. She got a 1 hour time advantage on the clock at
Wow.
some point. She really barely spent any time in the opening in the middle game. As Tatev mentioned, as we talked about yesterday, a lot of the moves and the plans were quite clear, were quite straightforward. So we'll see if that repeats itself today. You were the one calling the shots on the last time they played with these same colors. What do you expect for today?
Yeah, I think they will repeat the opening. I'm curious if Alexandra is going to change the opening.
Mhm.
She didn't really get. I mean, she got a decent position, but it's common that in the Queen's Gambit Carlsbad structure, that when you play with the black pieces, you're not really fighting for a win there. It's white that typically has an advantage there. And Alexandra played really well and defended super well, but she was not able to have any chances to convert to a better position. So I'm curious to see if she will decide to change it up, because I've seen Tan Zhongyi mainly play the first move d4. So maybe we'll see a different variation against d4. But yeah, I will have to see what Alexandra decides to do.
Yeah, I'm also curious how the players evaluate. I see a comment in the chat. We want the grub. Oh my God, Anna Maya, I'm traumatized. I think my whole chat is still traumatized from that PMD arena we played. I think we were actually even on the same call where my community
Right.
faced Alessia's community in the final, and Alessia picked the grub. And my whole community, even a half a year later, I think we're all still traumatized from having to play the grub.
Oh,
And
that's
I actually
hilarious.
it is. And the last time I streamed a few days ago, someone played the grub against me in an arena and I lost in 6 moves.
What?
I've blundered my piece to that check like I don't even know. The grub fans will know what I'm talking about. So the grub would be fun, but I don't think I don't think we'll see it today.
Yeah,
What I
it's
was maybe not on that stage, yeah.
right.
What I was talking about is I'm curious how the players each evaluate their chances in the rapid format, because that could also influence how much they want to try, as we see Tan Zhongyi
Hmm.
just arrive at the board there. We talked about this a little bit with Tatev yesterday. I think Tan Zhongyi is a player that we might not know as much about, in the West. I'm sure a lot of the
Yeah.
tournaments she has played will have been in China, in Asia. But I think she has a great track record. Tatev has played her a bit. So I don't think any of the players, as we see the ceremonial first move being played, 1d4, is on the board, is taken back. That's
Oh,
it is standard procedure to take it back. Who knows? I mean, will she go
true.
with d4 again? Will she mix it up? I think you're saying you expect one d4, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we've seen throughout the event that Danjogi sticks to d4, so I'm not expecting any different, honestly. And she has been getting decent positions. And as you mentioned, her time management is insane. And
Mhm.
me and Alessia were commentating on the tiebreak she played against Katerina Lagno, and she had an amazing time management in the rapid format.
Mhm.
So the fact that she was playing so well in rapid, having such a time advantage over Katerina Lagno, I'm also expecting today that she will have a good time management.
I mean, you also raise an interesting point, in this pool knockout format for the candidates. They've both just played one match going into this,
Mm-hmm.
where Tanjong had to go through tiebreaks. Alexandra didn't. Sometimes it can help to just be warmed up already in the faster time controls. Um, but yeah, both players, I think, today will just try to probably not think of the tiebreak too much. Just both
Mm-hmm.
try their best, and yeah,
And we
we'll
see
see
the
how that goes.
handshake.
Yeah, we're off,
And there you go,
and
1d4.
1d4 is on the board. And now we'll see. Will Alexandra stick to her guns? Will she mix it up? D4,
Okay.
d5. So
Okay.
far,
Mm-hmm.
nothing new.
Yep, c4 has been played, c6. This was also in the second game. Knight to f3. So far, so good. This seems like we've seen this in the second game as well. They may
Hmm.
just repeat it. Knight of 6. And yeah, it's very typical here. Knight c3. This is the Slav defense, and there's many different lines over here. The line we saw in the second game was where White would eventually took on d5, and there was e6 played. Black took with the pawn on d5, and there was a Coswell type of structure. I'm curious to see if we'll see this today. But as we see it on the board, Bishop g5. This was exactly what happened in game 2, Fiona.
I've opened game two to make sure. Because sometimes it's so easy that one little move is different, that it
Mm-hmm.
feels like it's the same, but it's not quite the same. So I've opened the game to make sure, but so far, you're absolutely correct. Okay, here's our first small difference. She's now gone e3.
Mm-hmm.
In game two, she took on d5 first, and then played e3. So if Alexandra now goes bishop e7, then we could once again, after capture on d5, transpose back into the game they had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's all sorts of different lines there. She may not just take on d5 anymore. She may go for bishop d3, allowing d
Mm.
takes c4, bringing us to other lines. And this may get pretty complicated. And yeah, that could lead to sharp positions. So I'm curious to see how Alexandra will continue now. I guess she has to develop the bishop somewhere. She can go to e7, as you mentioned. D6 is also a square she can go to. Bishop e4 looks appealing, but it feels like it's too late to play it. However, queen a5 is on the board. Okay.
Yeah, now we're gonna get something new, I guess, completely compared to their previous game at least. Queen
Mm-hmm.
e5. I'm just quickly gonna look at the opening. Queen a5 is actually the main move
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah,
design,
right. Mm-hmm.
and c takes played very quickly. C takes is the third most common, so the main move is knight d2, and the second most common bishop takes f6, and c takes d. Still plenty of games here. I see the chat is getting a bit excited that this line can get. The chat called it sexy. I don't know if that if we can say that. Can get exciting.
Well, I'm not
Let's
sure
say.
anymore, unfortunately. This line is, I believe it's called the Cambridge Springer line, and
Mhm.
it can get pretty dry. I don't see much excitement, unfortunately, especially after c takes d5. It becomes quite a solid position. In the semi-Slav, you have those sharp positions where you take on c4. Let's go back maybe a couple of moves to
Mhm.
show exactly how that is like. You have those type of positions where, let's say, bishop d6 was played, and after bishop d3, there is moves like d takes c4, bishop takes c4, and black plays b5. And the idea is that after this bishop leaves, black plays a6, bishop b7, and c5. And these positions can get pretty exciting as black gets a lot of space here on the queen side, and in the center is also able to develop there. So black gets a lot of activity, and it can get very exciting. But especially if white takes on d5, these type of ideas are non-existent. So it's interesting to see Alexandra going for queen a5. But this is a very it's a well-known line. I used to play this with the black pieces, but I never really liked it. Have you
What
experienced with
didn't
this?
No, I don't. I was just gonna ask you, what didn't you like about it from the black side?
I think because I was simply unfamiliar with the position. I remember I think I prepared this during a European teams match,
Mhm.
and I've completely forgot the line on like move 8 or 7. I think my opponent played 92, what you mentioned earlier, and I was already out of book, and my coach was very upset at me. I did manage to win the game, so there was not much to complain
That's
about. But
something.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the first thing my coach said when I finished my game was like, "What was that in the opening?"
They don't like it. I've had experience with that as well. Even when the game ends up going well, like very often they're not impressed when we forget everything from the get-go. I
Yep.
was just looking again. So Rook C1 is actually was slightly offbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Move more common, much more common is Queen D2.
Right.
So actually after Rook C1, and then Alexandra blitzed out, well, not blitzed out, but only spent a minute on H6, and we're now already in quite little played territory.
Right. Yeah, I think, I mean, black is putting pressure on the knight on c3, so you can follow it
Mm.
up with bishop b4, but it's very easy for white to defend here. You always have moves like queen b3, queen d2, as you mentioned, maybe even queen c2, but black already took on c3. How do you feel about this move?
Yeah, it's surprising to me.
Mm-hmm.
I was just sorry. I was actually sidetracked because
Mm-hmm.
we're still following a game that was played between Ding Liren and Duda, and I was just thinking it probably not a coincidence, you know, that a Chinese player has played this. I think very often a lot of these players have worked together or sort of play similar openings. I was very surprised when I was in uh, in Astana in Kazakhstan in September for the women's Grand Prix. And suddenly on day 2 or 3, I showed up to lunch and Yu Yang was there. And so he was working, he was clearly there as a second for the two Chinese players.
Mm.
So interesting that they are following that game. Dingley Ren, Jan Khrushchev do that. It was from an online rapid tournament, but still.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I
Mm.
also recognize this position from my preparation that never happened. But yeah, maybe let's have a look at why the pawn on a2 was not captured. Because it seems like you can capture this pawn on a2, it's for free, and it seems like the queen can escape. So maybe let's look into that a bit more, as queen takes a2 seems logical. But yeah, the thing is that white can develop so easily. This bishop on
Mhm.
c8 is still stuck, and you don't want your only developing piece to be the queen. That's not a good sign typically. So I'm curious, what would be the move here? I have a feeling that you can play moves like rook a1, c4, and it can get really dangerous for this queen. You can maybe even simply ignore it, play bishop d3, short castle, and I guess it's safe to say that positionally speaking, this is inaccurate to play. It's a pawn, but
It feels
yeah, it's gonna
very
take.
greedy.
Yeah, yeah. You're not gonna get punished right away for it.
Yeah.
I would say you're not losing the queen, but you
Mm.
get punished by it by in the next few moves. You'll notice that you're behind on development, and yeah, white is controlling the center. Bishop d3, e4, e5, and it will go really fast. And I also have to note this bishop doesn't really have many squares. Currently, it can go to d6, but on e7 it will be traded, and the king will not be able to castle. And all the other squares, c5 is controlled, b4 is controlled, a3 doesn't feel
Mm.
safe under the current circumstances. So perhaps, yeah, maybe a simple rook a1 and simply develop bishop d3, short castle, and white should have more than enough compensation for that pawn.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And funnily enough, I just see the Lord, where is it in the chat? The one Lord God says, it seems like Goryachkina won a game against Pierre Crumling in 2019 from this position too.
Ah.
And I had actually just spotted this as well when I was looking. So up until b6, which is just the previous move on the board,
Mm-hmm.
Goryachkina had played this position not just once but twice actually from the black side, as mentioned in the chat. She won a game against Pia Kremling, and she also made a draw from this position against Artyom Timofeyev, a very strong Russian grandmaster. So she has experience in this very position. And 92, as far as I can tell,
Yeah,
at least
true.
in my database, at least I'm not seeing any games. So it looks like this is the first new move, and it was played in only
Mm-hmm.
10 seconds by Tanjori. Do you think this is a sign that maybe she could have won the opening battle, or do you think it's too early to tell?
I don't know. It's so hard to tell. Seeing the way Tan Zhongyi plays, she seems to be ready for everything. I mean, having 1 hour, 35 minutes on the clock in a classical game, I mean, for me, it only ever happened when I would play the Ruy Lopez theory of 20 moves. But this is super rare. And I've also noticed throughout this event, Tan Zhongyi's time management is out of this world. Ever since the tiebreak, this has really caught my eye, caught my attention, and
Mhm.
I'm still beyond shocked that she's able to play so fast, so accurate, and it's so intimidating. As a being her opponent, I mean, me personally, I would already feel intimidated, and the game has barely even started.
Absolutely. And I think if you're Goryachkina, you have to be a little bit frustrated.
Yeah.
Even if I don't think it affects her in a way, but
Mm-hmm.
just as you say, every single time Tanjong has just been ready for everything. I don't know how she does it. She keeps blitzing Bishop
Yeah.
A6 and C4 immediately. It's just, yeah, very, very impressive. What do you make of this bishop development to a6, the c4 push?
Yeah, I think bishop a6 is a very logical move. It's strange to see that you're allowing your opponent to develop the bishop right away, as in allowing the trade without the bishop having moved yet. This saves a move in a way. But on the other hand, if we take a look at bishop takes a6, queen takes a6, it becomes hard to see how the king can castle right now. I guess you
Hmm.
do have the move c4 to castle on the next move, but I would say that you don't want to trade this with the bishop with the white pieces. So playing c4 first, rather than capturing that bishop, makes a perfect sense. This bishop is typically much better. You can go to d3 after that, and this bishop doesn't really have many squares, and you'll have to get really creative with bishop b7, c5 to open it up. So yeah, I really like that Alexandra is going for this line, but Tan Zhongyi played move c4, and yeah, this makes perfect sense. I do have to know that this knight is now pinned, so perhaps
Hmm.
black can start attacking with bishop b4. And yeah, it always feels a little bit uncomfortable, but it seems like with the rook on c2, queen on d1, seems to be all right for white.
I see that Bowties in the chat is asking, is this a blitz game? It certainly feels that way. At the moment, I mean, Tanzhongyi is just, let me see, what was her longest thing so far? Tanzhongyi was 13 seconds on C4.
Wait,
That's,
you're right.
that's been the most she's spent
Wow.
on a move. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the development for both sides. As you mentioned, the knight
Mm-hmm.
on D2 is pinned. I think white wants to get castled as soon as possible, so we need to get out the bishop from F1. I assume that will go to D3 rather than E2 if there is no
Mm-hmm.
no problems with that. So I guess bishop D3, castling kingside. And then it's interesting. It feels like the white pieces have a lot of potential of where they could go to. I always get excited when I have sort of two bishops which are sort of looking, towards the king side.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
can already
absolutely.
see my queen coming out to G4
Yep.
and then something. Um, but I mean, we don't barely have time. Whenever Goryachkina makes a move, the next move is already on the board.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, bishop d3 is really logical in that sense.
Mhm.
And as you mentioned, the idea makes a lot of sense to simply go short castle, queen g4. And I've yet to see where black's attack is going to happen. Perhaps black will focus on the move c5.
Mhm.
If your opponent is attacking you on the side, on one of your sides, then it's always logical to attack in the center. Um, but yeah, I mean, White's piece development is really good, and it's almost hard to see where the pieces can be on better squares. I mean, I guess the knight can be on a better square, but other than that, queen to g4, short castle, and yeah, I really like White's position there.
Absolutely, I agree with you. If I were black, I would already start, just making sure my queen doesn't get trapped on a5. If we imagine white castles and then the knight becomes free to move. Because right now, I mean, okay, let's just make a couple of random moves. Rook
Mm-hmm.
c8, castles,
Mm-hmm.
rook e8. I know it's not, I thought it was trapped already, but no, it still has a4 and b4. But my point was along the fifth rank, all the squares
Yeah, they're
are
all
covered.
covered. That's actually insane. This one is covered, this one's covered by the bishop, this one's covered by the bishop, and the queen is covering h5. That's actually insane. So indeed, only b4 and a4 are available. And I mean, to be fair, you don't really have so much to do on those squares. If I play knight b3, and yeah, even if you get to b4, I would be really concerned still. Imagine if white plays moves like c5. I don't know, it doesn't look great to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's just something that tells it. But I think Alexandra, even if she is the one who has spent more time, I think we've seen this a few times in this match. She takes her time more than Tan Zhongyi in the very early stages. But the fact that she's still playing relatively quickly, I wouldn't be surprised if both players were still in known territory, but Goryachkina is just taking a bit more time,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure she doesn't, get the move order wrong, just to decide. Um, because I think we cannot stress enough just how many openings and different lines these players look at before a tournament like this, and then once again before every specific game. So I think if, like Tanzhongyi, if you are confident that you're sure, that the move you're making is the right move, is the move that you were looking at, then there's nothing wrong with playing it
Mm-hmm.
as fast. But I think I'm also more on Team Goryachkina. I don't play so much these days, but when I play, I also like to, just make sure, is this really what I looked at? And I'm not saying she's doing it in the same way that I am, but I just feel it's more of a personal approach, whether you want to blitz everything out or take a little bit more time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know, speaking from experience, I always want to take some time in the opening.
Mm,
Even if I know this is my preparation, I want to double check maybe I'm missing something or I'm messing up the move order, because one small detail can make the difference and then you'll regret for blitzing out your moves. I've seen many, many instances where people were so sure about their opening prep and they simply forgot about one move and then
mhm,
their whole position collapsed. And that's really sad because indeed those players spend so much time on their opening prep, and well, sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't, but looking at the players' time management, it seems like it is paying off. And yeah, I really like White's position here once again. I mean, those bishops of black, this bishop on a6, bishop on a3, they look so sad to me.
I agree. I guess Black's argument, and we're just saying that
Mm-hmm.
Goryachkina just took on d4. I guess Black's argument is that she wants to play against those two hanging pawns, so the pawn on c4 and the pawn on d4. Hanging pawns is one of the pawn structures that I've always struggled a little bit, when is it a strength, when is it a weakness? So I guess Black's play will be focused against that. I imagine a rook will come
Mm-hmm.
to c8 quite soon, putting pressure on the pawn on c4. And the question is, can White really? I agree with you. I also like White's position, but could this get quite concrete? I mean, does really White really have an initiative, with that nice piece play we talked
Mm-hmm.
about on the knight on d2? Can that even really move, or do we want to keep the knight on d2 to defend the pawn on c4? Um, I'm surprised. I Not surprised, but I see that the valuation bar. I mean, I haven't looked at any engine lines, but I see that the bar is firmly in the middle. So maybe there's just enough active counterplay here. Well, probably there's enough active counterplay here for Black to just be fine.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard to see where this knight actually wants to be. I mean, ideally, you would want to play knight to e5. But if you think about it, if you
Mhm.
allow knight takes e5, pawn takes, either like you really need to have a good attack on the king side to make this work, or it's simply not great because your pawn structure will be extremely weakened. So it's hard to see where this knight can go elsewhere. I mean, we still have this bishop over here controlling some of the squares along this diagonal. This bishop can go to b7 whenever needed to control this diagonal. So indeed, black still has something to play for here. And this makes it hard, I guess, for both sides to really find a
Mhm.
proper plan, because as soon as white plays queen g4, it becomes a bit hard to see how white can continue. I guess rook e1, rook e3, rook g3, but it's a little bit slow. And in the meantime, black can consolidate.
Yeah, and also, I mean, those black bishops we talked about earlier, they might look weird, both of them
Mm-hmm.
on the edge of the board. But the bishop on a3 is doing, for now at least, a good job of just controlling c1, stopping white from ever doubling rooks on the c file. And it's hard to see how white would stop black from bringing that bishop back whenever she wants. I see bow ties, and hello, bow ties. Good to see you here. Is saying the black pawn structure looks a bit French to me. And you're a French player, if I'm not mistaken, or?
True, yes. I think these kind of structures we can see in many lines where if you have a pawn on d5 with the black pieces, you take on c4 and the pawn is recaptured, and you get these type of positions like that. And also after c5, you take on d4. But typically the trade on c4, I mean, it doesn't happen so easily. Or if the pawns get traded like this, then there's a pawn on c4. I don't know. It doesn't happen too much. I guess an opening where this happens more often, the structure comes from the Caracan, the Panov variation.
Mhm.
You have many different lines where you see this type of pawn structures. And yeah, one of the lines is the Queen's Gambit, which we have in this game. So yeah, in the French, it doesn't happen too often that we see hanging pawns. It's pretty rare, especially since there's a pawn on c3 most of the times. Yeah, I don't know. It's I guess because the bishop is on a6 and not doing so much, maybe it resembles something with the French opening,
Yeah.
but not more than that, I think.
Also, I mean, I have to say, I see Scorpio Seb is saying this position is so dry, my eyes are red by watching it. I actually have to disagree with that. I mean, I think what we saw yesterday, for example, with a completely symmetrical pawn structure and even the piece, I mean, at some point yesterday, we had almost a completely mirror position, 20 moves in. I think today it's actually a very dynamic position with completely different pawn structures with active piece play for both sides, many possibilities of pawn breaks. So yeah, I don't think this position is dry at all. It's actually a lot more lively than I expected.
No, I agree. There's a lot going on in this position. Black is playing against those hanging pawns, and they can become very vulnerable. At the same time, white can start attacking on the king side, but with good defense, that shouldn't be too hard for black. And yeah, it definitely gives a lot of options to both sides here. At least the pawn structure is not symmetrical, indeed. And yeah, there's a lot to play for sure.
Absolutely. I see another comment, Pizza Racer, good to see you here too. He's saying, I find the position hard to evaluate positionally. I find it hard to. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
Anna. Like, where would we even start to evaluate this position?
Yeah,
How to
I
go on about
think um okay, first things first, those pawns in the center, they control a lot of squares, obviously. They are controlling all of the squares I'm highlighting, but at the cost of being very weak pawns. There's no pawns next to it. The pawns are on its own pretty much, and if you push one of the pawns, I mean, you make a lot of squares weak. The knight will be able to access c5 or e5. You cannot push c5 whatsoever because you simply lose the pawn if we disregard this bishop on d3 for now. And yeah, that makes it really hard for white to deal with the pawn structure. On the other hand, because white has so much space, the upside for this drawback is that you get to attack on one of the sides. The pieces are really well developed on d3 and h4. I would say the pieces of white are really well placed. Preferably, you would want to move the knight to a better square, but as we said earlier, it's hard to find a good square for this knight. So for the time being, the knight on d2 is perfectly fine. And on the other hand, black's development is all right, but you know, I've seen better developments. This bishop on a6 is not doing much, but as soon as it gets to b7, we're talking about a different position there. So yeah, all in all, I think positionally speaking, I would say black has a slight advantage long term because of those pawns, but they have to figure out how to defend their king. Make sure they don't get checkmated somehow because it can get dangerous.
exactly. I was just thinking while you're explaining some of the aspects of the position, um, that sometimes, as commentators, uh, we use these phrases, and I think I've seen some people, joke about it. How some phrases sometimes when you're not sure. I mean, this is one of the positions, where we might, or where I might say, it's dynamic equality. Just throw that out there. Let the people make of it what they will.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I see Bota is also saying the queen side looks a bit unusual. Restricted queen on a5, two bishops on the a file, and on the other side a rook on c2, which is not doing more than guarding a2 and c4. That's also true. I mean, there's this kind of staticness right now. But I think, okay, we also have to talk about Black's last move, rook e8.
Yeah.
I had said I expect the rook to come to c8, which to me looked more natural. But rook e8 makes me wonder, does Black want to break in the center with e5 at some point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it provokes the move d5, but on the other hand, I mean, this pawn looks obviously really strong. But on the other hand, you're allowing knight c5, and then maybe e4 might be played. So you're making a really interesting point. I think e5 would be an interesting move to play. Especially, I mean, d takes e5 is a sin to play because after knight takes e5, the pawns are even worse than before. So yeah, I think e5 makes a lot of sense, and that's really surprising to see. Typically, you don't see this move being played at all, but here I can see it being played actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And what did so Queen e2?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so now it begs the question, will Alexandra actually play the move e5, or does she
Mhm.
have something else in mind? Because typically you played a move like rook e8 to free up the square f8 for one of your other pieces. For example, the knight goes to f8 to go to g6, or the bishop goes to f8 to guard g7 and h6. But here, I don't see why black should go for these ideas. So yeah, I think it would be really interesting to see e5 on the board.
Yeah, and well, actually, I've just I think we can look at it because I
Hmm.
on my analysis board made e5 on the board, and the bar immediately
No
was
mercy.
very unhappy with me. So maybe we could try and figure out. I'll
Hmm.
look away again from the evil bar now.
I think one of
Um,
the problems is queen e4.
yep.
It's a direct threat to play queen h7, and it's hard to see how black can stop it. I mean, you do have g6. After knight f6, white simply captures that, and
Mhm.
knight f8, I guess, also works, but the pawn is hanging on e5. So I think
But
that's much worse.
it's
Hmm?
not hanging, right? Because there's the
Oh
queen
yeah, right.
on
I
a5.
completely missed the queen.
It's easy to miss. So let's try and figure out what's wrong because I thought knight f8 must be the
Maybe knight
move
b3
here.
first then,
Ah, knight b3, and
and then
suddenly
I'll
the
take.
queen. Yeah.
We'll get there. But yeah, if you have to play g6, I mean, it looks really dangerous to me. You'll have to face moves like queen c6, knight e4, and suddenly there will be like many holes in black's position, and it becomes very vulnerable.
Absolutely. By the way, I've just seen the polls. I'm a bit late, chat. Bear with me, but I've just seen the result of the poll that was done at the start of the game of who will win the match today, and the poll was actually very, very close. 23% of people voted for Goryachkina, 22% for Tan Zhongyi, and 54 for a tiebreak tomorrow. I think in the Netherlands you also cannot take part in predictions, right?
Nope, unfortunately not. It's really sad, but
So Anna Maya and I we're both banned from taking part in the predictions, but I would have put a lot of my channel points on a tiebreak tomorrow
yeah,
if
me
I could.
too.
Do you
Yeah, I
still
mean, it
feel
makes
that
sense.
way?
Mhm.
Do you still feel that way with the game as it is now?
Yeah, it can lead to draws positions still. I mean, there's still a lot going on in the position, but I can definitely see this go to a drawish, a very equal position where
Yeah.
nothing's happening. So yeah, I can still see that happen.
Yeah, so now after Queen e2, so we've
Hmm?
determined that e5 is no good. So how do you think, what options does Black have here for how to continue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to say. Maybe you want to start off with bishop b7. Okay, rook a8 has been played, which is also an interesting move to me, but apparently the engine bar is very displeased. Could it be that queen e4 is still a problem?
Wow, it really did not like that. A
Ooh.
move which I was saying looks so natural. Okay, so let's see.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always so tempted when the bar jumps. I just want to go and look at the engine, but I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna look at it for now. Let's see if we can figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. That also feels more natural, right?
Yeah.
So let's take a look. I guess so. Once again, the queen doesn't have any squares on the fifth rank. So one of the moves we have to consider is knight to b3 for the simple reason that the queen on a4 or b4 might be worse. Maybe there are some tactical motives with c5, although I'm not spotting them. Actually, wait a second. Now that I'm talking about it, I was wondering if I can make something happen here,
Mhm.
but how about c5? Bishop takes, queen takes, and look what tactic we have in a
Yeah.
position. This bishop is trapped.
Oh my goodness.
And this not only is the knight attacking the queen and the bishop, it is also threatening to go to d6 and fork the rooks.
This is
Ooh.
crazy. So let's go back. See, it's so funny how this just happened 1 second after. I'm like, I would have put all my points, all my points on the tie break, and literally 1 second later, the evil bar is like, hello.
No,
Okay,
no,
so let's
no.
see. C5
Yeah.
and C5 looks to be the move. Now, what's the problem? Okay, so I guess black cannot take on D3, or does she have to take?
Oh yeah, if she takes, yeah, it's really hard to see how she can defend knight
Yeah.
c4 because even if you move one of the pieces away, let's say, I don't know, queen a4, you still have the problem of knight c4, the bishop is under
Mhm.
attack, and d6 is the threat, knight d6.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah,
simply
that's
cannot
a
defend
point.
everything.
And if you go B5, I think my bishop's gonna get trapped. B5, sorry.
Oh, b5, right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see, can you still play knight e4?
There's even
Mm.
knight B1 already.
Oh yeah,
Because
bishop
I mean,
b4 and a3.
yeah, but if I have to after knight B1, if I have to play B4, okay, that's just very sad.
Yeah, that's one way of dealing with your bishop. Yeah, no, that certainly doesn't help, and this knight will simply go the other
Go
way
back.
again,
Yeah.
go back and find its way to d6. But yeah, this position is devastating. I mean, let's go back and maybe play b5 directly to still keep the bishops in on the board. Maybe it makes a difference. So what is happening here? How can white strike here? Because you cannot attack the bishop so easily anymore,
Mhm.
but there's still so many problems in black's position. I have a feeling that you can
I mean,
simply play knight e4 or queen e4.
what about even just rook B1 and attacking the pawn on B5? Because my idea was if
True.
you go rook B8, bishop G3, maybe
Right.
something like that, and I don't know. Okay, let's make the move, see what the bar. It's always such it's such a good feeling when the bar stays up, but it doesn't. Okay, let's try your move.
Yeah, I wasn't entirely sure which move is better, but I guess putting knight to d6 is not
Yeah.
a bad start. It is saying +3, +4, so there must be a
Wow.
huge move. But even after knight e4, I mean, you're threatening knight d6, but I guess it's just hard for black to defend the position because look how sad black's pieces are because of the pawns on d4 and c5. They're blocking so many squares, and you can argue that d5 is now weakened, but I don't see any piece go there. And even if the bishop gets there, I mean, this pawn b5 is hanging. I can always play c6,
And
and
Amaya, Sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you, but C5 is on the board.
I was about to say, I saw the hand movement of going to play c5. We have this on the board. This
Oh my
is
goodness.
insane.
And this is okay, I mean it's not losing yet, but Rook C8 was a serious mistake. If we look at Goryachkina, she's not I think she has such a great poker face. I've, been following her and been commentating on her games for a long time. Um, but I wonder if she even realized while Tan Chongyi was thinking that she allowed something quite serious. I mean, this is a let's not, sugarcoat this. Rook C8 was a serious mistake, and she
Yeah.
is she is in serious trouble already. It's only move 18.
Yeah, I
What do you
mean,
think is going
Mhm.
through her mind right now?
I think c5 is one of those moves you simply don't expect. It's such a
Mm,
natural move. It weakens d5. The knight loves to go there. Even if a bishop manages to get there, that's amazing. But I have a feeling that this move simply didn't cross her mind because it's so unnatural. And that goes to show how resourceful Tan Zhongyi is. She played with queen e2, which looked rather odd at first because we thought queen g4 was a very active move, and white could continue the attack from there. But queen e2 with the idea to play c5, and it
mhm.
is such a sneaky move. So I have a feeling this is simply not considered by Alexander whatsoever because it's such an unusual move. And this goes to show that when your pieces are placed differently than usual, the bishops are on the a file, queen on a5, not very comfortable, it allows for such tactics to happen sooner or later. And here we see c5 making use of all the weaknesses in black's position. This bishop is now stuck on a3. d6 is a target for this knight on d2. And yeah, Tan Zhongyi made perfect use of trying to improve the pieces
Mhm.
by, I mean, making the square d6 free for the knight. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, and also I wonder if C5, I don't think this is preparation any longer, but it could be an idea at least that Tan Zhongyi has seen in the past. This Queen E2 move, I was, when she played Queen E2, I thought, okay, the Queen's going to
Mm-hmm.
E4. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if she knew beforehand that C5 can be a problem for black in these lines. And Goryachkina, well, we see her deep in thought there under our cameras. She did let out a sigh at least, and I think it's so tough to be in her shoes now because okay, she's maybe yet to evaluate just how bad it is, but she already, I think, understands it's bad, and
Mm-hmm.
um, it's just tough, such a tough spot. Let's remind everyone this is the final classical game. If she loses here, that's it. She's out of the candidates. And you make a move Rook C8, which looks like a normal move. Um, she made it in under 4 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then here it comes, and you're suddenly faced with the very real possibility of just being losing. I think we're yet to find a line where black can fight, and maybe we should look for one. But it's just such a tough spot for her to be in right now.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I mean, it's really difficult to see how Black can try to save the position because the threats are very clear and your bishop is under attack. So does Black need to resort to moves like knight b8 to defend the bishop? I have a feeling this is the only way you can try to get out of this and save your pieces because you have to stop knight c4 at any cost. And
Yeah.
the only ways of doing that is by defending the bishop so that you can, after knight c4, you capture with the bishop, or by playing b5. And we saw already that b5 is not going to cut it. What Black's position will be really sad. So I have a feeling knight b8 is the only move just to defend this bishop. And after bishop takes a6, you'll take with the queen. And it's still
Mhm.
not a great position. I mean, obviously, this pawn on c5 is super strong. White will have a very comfortable endgame, but I think this is the only way you can avoid losing material for black.
I have to say, I mean, I'm even still not clear how is this so good for
Mm-hmm.
white, this position, because I see the c5 pawn, but the c5 pawn right now is under attack 3 times.
Yeah.
So I guess I have to do something about that. So I don't know if I want to play queen e3.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what what do we want to do here as white? Why is this so good for us?
I think it has to do with the fact that, let's say, queen takes, knight takes, this knight e4 move, it's really ruining. Okay, maybe it's not appealing to the engine, but I
Mhm.
was gonna say that you want to move your knight to d6 and try to make something happen with those pawns. Perhaps knight e4 is a little bit too early to play since.
Maybe why not knight
Mhm.
c4 instead of
Oh
knight
yeah,
e4?
right. That's a better move. Yeah, good point. Attacking the bishop and threatening knight
Yeah.
d6. Right. Yeah, it slipped my mind. I mean, knight e4 has been in position for so
Mm,
long, but since the bishops are now off the board as well as the queens, knight c4 indeed. And yeah, simply knight d6 on the next move after bishop b4. I can even play a3 actually.
yeah. Just at least picking up an exchange.
Yeah. So I have a feeling this is why. And there's simply nothing you can do about it with the black pieces. I mean, this is all pretty forced, and I don't see a better move than knight b8 in this position. I mean, the bishop is under attack once again. The only moves you can try to hold on here and not allow knight c4 is to play b5 or knight b8, and those moves are really devastating to play.
I mean, b5 just looked so terrible.
Yeah.
If if black takes on d3, there is no way there to stop.
Let's have a look. So, okay, once again, knight c4 is a threat. Are there ways where you maybe sacrifice on c5 since you're losing material here anyways, or maybe you accept the fact that you're losing the exchange and find compensation there? It's hard to say.
Yeah, I'm also really struggling to. Actually, this was the line where we looked at b5 now, right?
Yeah, b5
Uh,
now. And yeah, we were looking at knight b1,
yeah, no,
and
so
it looked
this
really
doesn't
sad.
work. Yeah, so let's try and find something else than b5. So if we take on c5,
Yeah, I guess there's knight c4 and
what about queen a6?
right. Yeah, that's a oh, but I guess you can take with the queen.
Oh yeah, I missed that. But why did the bar? Okay, maybe what the computer wants is to give up the piece and take the 2 pawns.
Yeah, and you may still have some compensation, but preferably you do not want to go to this.
No,
But I think there, black doesn't have a choice really.
no. I mean, to me, it looks like black is either losing an exchange or either losing a piece. Black will always get probably either a pawn for the exchange or 2 pawns for the piece, but none of the positions that we have seen, none of the resulting positions look like anything like serious compensation for black, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is insane. And the fact that Tanjogi has such a good position and has only spent 3 minutes off her clock ever since the start of the match is insane. She's been playing so fast, she's so well prepared, and yeah, the confidence is just shining. I remember when commentating on the first match, it was pretty shaky. She played this
Mm,
match against Katerina Lagno, and she was having a hard time against Katerina. Katerina played so well. She was the only one putting pressure on Tanjongi, and in tiebreaks, Tanjongi started to shine, and ever since she has been unstoppable.
yeah, and I mean, today, what a moment this is. I mean, I think everyone is just in shock. This is not something we expected. That suddenly, Goryachkina, we're not even 1 hour into the game, and she's not lost, but on the verge. I mean, she's very close to being lost. And I think, Anna Maya, this is actually a good moment for us to go into our first break, because I imagine that Goryachkina will be taking quite a bit of time here to at least try and come up with the most resilient defense. But don't go anywhere. This game is certainly a lot more exciting, I think, than any of us expected. And Tan Zhongyi, yeah, looking like she might be a big favorite to just go through without tiebreak. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back with all the action in just a few minutes. Hello and welcome back to game four of the semi-final Women's Candidates Tournament Pool B, your host for the day. My name is Sylvia Style Anthony and I'm here with whom I am, Anna Maya Kazaran. Anna Maya, what a development we have in the game where c5 is on the board and it looks like Goryachkina is already in some serious trouble.
Absolutely, Fiona. This is insane. We did not expect this whatsoever. We thought it was going to be very solid, calm, peaceful draw, but instead we're seeing some fire already on move 18 and barely time has passed. And Alexandra Goryachkina is in serious trouble. So I'm really curious to see what she will be playing now.
Absolutely. What a game. We'll jump back into the action in just a second. For now, we have an exciting announcement for you guys, and you should get ready for the Q4 2022 State of Chess.com coming to you live on December 21st. We have some huge news for the chess community, and the event will be followed by a community Q&A with Danny Wrench. Plus, some very special guests will be joining the show to talk about the exciting announcements we're making and what these announcements mean for the future of the chess community. Don't miss this show, December 21st at 10 a.m. PST, right here on Twitch TV forward as chess / chess. It's such a hard thing to say. Um, but yeah, just 11 days away. I am very excited to find out what the announcements will be. So I'll be tuning
Mm-hmm.
in for sure.
Me
Uh,
too.
yeah, it's always those big announcements. I think a lot of people think maybe we have some details, but no, we don't. We'll be finding out with the rest of you. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, meanwhile, back in Kiev, Uzbekistan, C5 and Goryachkina has sunk into a really big thing. We can see from the timer on the top left side of your screen that she's been thinking for almost 20 minutes. And maybe we can just rewind a couple of moves for people who might have just joined us and try and explain how did it all go wrong so fast with what seemed like an innocuous looking move, Rook C8.
Yeah, exactly, Fiona, because it all seems very calm, very nice position. I mean, it looks rather strange to see the bishops on the A file. The bishop seems stuck on A3, queen seems a little bit isolated on A5, the knight is alone on D7, and meanwhile, white has a nice development of pieces. Bishop is on D3, bishop on H4, queen has a lot of space available. This knight also can move around. So it looked pretty interesting, and it looked like there was nothing much going on. And after c takes e4, e takes e4, the pawns are hanging in the center. So that means they are weaknesses, but they're also good pawns in the sense that they're covering a lot of pawns in the center, so making it difficult for black to really position their piece as well. But after rook fe8, queen e2, Tan Zhongyi set up a trap here. And it was really hard to spot this, and it's not obvious whatsoever. And Alexander Goryachkina fell for it right away with rook a to c8. And you may wonder, what did she do wrong? And c5 was the answer. C5, and it is causing a lot of problems. And I'm actually seeing, Fiona, there is a move on the board, queen a4.
Yeah, and Queen A4, and we see that the evil bar, as it has been dubbed by the chat, does not like Queen A4 one bit. During our break, I see that Screws was saying, I wish we had behind the scenes footage of what the commentators get up to during the break. On my end, Screws, I can reassure you, you're not missing anything too exciting. Quick run to the bathroom, topping up my water, quick look at the evil bar. Trust me, nothing you would want to, nothing you would want to see. But yeah, I took a quick look. I didn't have time to look at the lines,
Mm-hmm.
but I did take a quick look at the engine during the break. I saw that the engine wanted to take on D3, a move which we thought was no was no good for black, and maybe in a second we
Hmm.
can go back to take a deeper look there.
Yeah.
But after queen a4, and I think we should have a look at that first, the move that's on the board, it does really not like it one bit. And from what was a difficult position for a bad position from Goryachkina, it seems to have just now gone to a lost position.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering what the move is because the obvious move here is okay, there's a bishop hanging, why not take
Mhm.
it? So let's look over that first. Now, I have a feeling that this is not great because queen takes c2, you can take the rook on c8, but you don't really make a lot of progress. I guess you do have moves like queen a6 to play. So the rook
Mhm.
is under attack, the bishop's under attack as well. So there's a lot of problems there. I guess you have to move the rook in any case. So let's say rook f8 is being played, for example. I guess one of the problems is this bishop is still trapped. So if you take, this knight will be captured, of course. And I mean, it's obvious that the white has a really good position, but I don't see how you're winning material right this second. Maybe if you take on a3, queen takes d2, c6, and where does this knight go? I'm not entirely sure. Knight of 6, I'll simply take that, and I think this
Mhm.
pawn on c6 will promote eventually. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, this looks fairly convincing. This pawn on c6 is just an absolute beast. I also wonder if we rewind a couple
Mm-hmm.
of moves. Yeah, so to this moment, so after queen a6, rook f8. Because you mentioned that this bishop on a3 was pretty much trapped, and we see Tan Zhongyi actually already making her response. I was wondering
Oh,
if we could somehow defend the knight or move the knight and play against that trapped bishop, but let's see what Tan Zhong. Well, we might just find
yeah,
out
we.
because.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, it seems like Tanjogi did play bishop takes a6, so we may indeed see this line on the board. As after bishop takes a6, let's go a few moves back. It's pretty obvious that you have to take on c2,
Mhm.
otherwise you're simply a full piece down with no compensation. So I think queen takes c2 is very logical, and at the same time bishop takes c8 must be played to take the rook back. And this seems all very logical. I think the interesting part starts here where white needs to figure
Mhm.
out how to win material or how to convert it to a winning position. And so far, the only move I'm spotting is queen a6 to continue attacking and release yourself from the knight because the knight also wants to move.
Yeah, I mean, you say, the only move you're spotting, but one good move is enough, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, I was hoping to find something better because the
Something
bishop
more.
is vulnerable, rook is vulnerable, but I'm simply not able to move the knight, and the only move I'm spotting is queen a6, and it looks a bit scary, as in you're not. It doesn't feel like you're improving the position that much that you're winning a piece right away, but it should be enough that you have this passed pawn, and it can go really fast. And we see this on the board. Let's quickly shift to the current position because this is exactly what has been played.
Yeah, all of these moves, I think, as you were pointing out, are pretty, a lot of them are pretty forced. I mean, white kind of had to take on e6, black had to take on c2. And after bishop takes c8, which is on the board, I also don't really see any. Oh, is bishop b4? No, that can't be moved because we take on d7 and hit the rook.
Yeah, and the rook cannot. So let's put it on the board real quick. Bishop b4, bishop takes e7, and you cannot even play rook d8 or rook e7 because of this bishop. So yeah, this is also not a move.
So I'm not sure what Alexandra she is still thinking, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
is there any move that we are missing other than recapturing? Does she have other options?
Doesn't look like it. I mean, you may consider moves like, I mean, knight takes c5, but obviously you're simply giving up a piece. That is not the move. Rook takes c8 seems very logical. Maybe she's realizing what is going on, that after rook
Yeah.
takes c8, there's queen a6. There is a chance she completely missed this, and she's now realizing that this bit pawn is becoming really strong and almost unstoppable.
I am with you. I also have a feeling that this is could be what's happening, that she missed something in her calculations earlier, we saw there, it's always hard, as I say, with her, but it feels like from what I can see from her face, I saw the eyebrows go up a little bit. I see Alessia is in the chat. Good to see you, Alessia. I think Alessia might just have been put out of a job for tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. We were all expecting that this match is going to tie breaks as well, but as it is looking like right now, we might not have a tie break just yet, and the match might finish today already.
Yeah, and I mean, I took a quick look at the engine because I was like, is there another move? There is no other move. Rook c8 is the only, and the fact that she hasn't played it, I really think, in my mind, confirms our theory that there's something she missed in this line. And I think c5 was the first really bad surprise. The holidays tomorrow for Alessia. One isn't supposed to work on a Sunday anyway, so it all works out.
True.
Um, but yeah, it seems like to me that this is the second bad surprise. I'm not sure what she missed, if it was Queen A6 or if it's something further down the line. But
Yeah.
this is really, really bad news here for Alexandra.
Yeah, let's quickly look back what happened exactly, because as we were talking about the move c5, the reason why, I mean, it's very obvious to see how strong this is for white. As after bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, the obvious threat here is knight c4, forking the bishop and the queen, and you're also threatening to play knight d6. And since this is definitely losing material, when you're on the board, you don't want to lose material. And I have a feeling that the reason why she played the move queen a4, she thought she's not losing material because this bishop, I mean, if you take on a6, I take on c2, and we simply have a trade. The only problem is there was one move after that, and she's not losing material, but her position is really bad because of this pawn on c5. And since this is the only move that isn't really losing material, it's understandable she went for it.
I actually just opened the engine because I think sometimes, we need a bit of help. This was really a crazy
Yeah.
tactical position, and I wanted to understand why was bishop d3 better than queen a4. So if she took on d3, queen takes, apparently
Mm-hmm.
her best shot there was bishop b4.
Okay.
And after knight c4, which I think is, the move we
Yeah.
thought was just crushing, then queen a6.
Uh-huh.
So for now, there's no knight d6 because the knight is pinned. And
Right.
here, apparently the best for white, okay, I'm just spouting out because the games are coming in the game. I think it would be very hard for us. It would take some time to figure out all the best moves.
Yeah.
So now after queen a6, a3 for white.
Yeah. And then bishop a5, I assume.
Yeah, either bishop a5 or b takes c, but let's say bishop a5 is the more human. Bishop a5, queen b3 for white, so unpinning the queen,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
rook c6. And it looks like black
Okay.
is avoiding the
But yeah,
loss
this looks
of
permanently
material.
bad because this
Yeah,
bishop is stuck. I'm gonna play knight d6
knight
a4.
d6 is the top move.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
mean, I guess the pawn on c5 feels a little bit loose, so in that sense, you can maybe play around it with the black pieces, but this is not pleasant. This bishop feels
no.
so bad, and there is just no harmony with black's pieces. They're all the pieces are scattered over the board, and almost every single piece can be attacked, which is not a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a horrible position, but the engine evaluates it at +1 for white. It, to my eye,
Mm-hmm.
also feels more pleasant than just the +1 advantage. But if we compare that to the position on the board right now after Queen A6, which has been played by Tan Zhongyi, I mean, the engine says it's +3. So while the other position was certainly unpleasant and certainly bad, this one seems to just be losing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very understandable that Alexandra played for this line. I have a feeling she missed this move, Queen A6, completely and simply
Mhm.
thought, I mean, it's already difficult to figure out what to do. You're facing this move C5, and it's a big surprise, and you're noticing all the problems in the position. So you want to find a way to get out of it. And I feel like Queen A4 is a really creative move, and obviously, we're all looking at the engine and we see the EVO bar. So it's really easy to judge and say, okay, Queen A4, what is that move? But if you look at it closer, it makes sense. The only problem is that it doesn't work tactically, because after what happened, Queen A6, and all of a sudden, it becomes clear that Black is in serious trouble and is simply not able to stop this pawn. And it goes to show how important it is to have your pieces in the right squares, because if the bishop was, for example, on f8, if the knight was
Mm.
on a slightly better square, the problems would not have been so bad.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And I'm just seeing in the chat that the one Lord God is saying there's still a chance for Black if after Rook C7, Tan doesn't go Bishop D8 apparently. So from that, I take that Rook C7 is the best move in the position, and it looks like
In this
White would
position?
in this position, yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah, it's that's interesting to see. And so bishop d8. Okay, but bishop d8 is a problem, right?
Yeah, but let's see, how is that not Rook C7, Bishop D8?
To me, it seems like this rook is almost getting trapped. I guess you still have rook c6, but the moves, the squares are running out for the rook.
You have maybe there's a Knight B8.
Oh my goodness,
Someone is
yeah. Knight
Knight
b8.
B8,
Oh my
but we
goodness.
just take on A3, no? What am
Take,
I?
and maybe you have rook d7.
Oh my God.
Okay, but this
Or
can't be
maybe
right.
Rook C8. No.
I'll take on b6. You can have my bishop, I'll run.
That's actually lovely. Okay, so let's go back one move. What if
Mm-hmm.
not Rook D7? Okay, but
You have
what
to move
else?
the
Rook.
rook.
Yeah. I mean, I refuse to believe that Black can somehow survive here. Rook C8 makes no difference, right? You're
Yeah.
still.
I mean,
Okay.
maybe like engine can, figure things out. But I think from a human point of view, when you're in a
Yeah.
worse position and you have a knight on b8, rook on c8, queen c2, and it's hard to see where the compensation is, I think it is so easy to go from, a worse position to the worst position.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we humans are, vulnerable to. I often notice in my games that I'm completely lost, or I'm losing. It's like
Mhm.
I'm a few pawns down or a piece down, and you're mentally already giving up. You're trying
Mhm.
still, but you're not playing the most ideal moves because it's so hard to see them, and you just assume you have no chances whatsoever already, even though
I
you're still
couldn't,
trying. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's something we see across all levels. Like so often, one bad move is followed by more mistakes. Like it's so
Mm-hmm.
rare that we see. I think it's much more common that after one bad move, we see not a collapse necessarily, but a couple more, bad moves or inaccuracies. And um, I think what you're getting at is just from that psychological point of view, it's so hard. Like, you made a big mistake, and it's so hard to reset and refocus and just keep finding the best moves from that moment out. And it's something I think we saw in this game. Rook c8 was a mistake, and then the immediate next move, Queen a4, was again another mistake, which of course is easy for us to say here with the help of the engine. But yeah, it's really really a tough spot right now for Alexandra. Um, I think this is a kind of position, even if she manages to, get over the psychological, I think, shock. Like she must be under shock, and she must be absolutely disgusted with herself for allowing this. I think even if
Mm-hmm.
she gets over that and she finds all the best moves from here on out, it might just be too late already.
Yeah, I mean, it's simply so hard to recover from this, and it's unavoidable, those threats in the position. And as we were looking at the lines, Black's pieces are simply not well placed anymore. And it's really hard to try to consolidate, try to find a way to come back. And there are quite a few players that are so resourceful that even in the worst positions, they can come back and find a way to swindle, even in classical. But
Mm,
this is one of those positions I don't see anything happen here. It's really straightforward to see White's idea, and pieces are being traded off, and there's not a lot of pieces left anymore. So there's also really hard. It's really hard to come back when there's so few
a-
pieces left.
Absolutely. All you're saying is true. And I think the final element is that if we look at the time situation, so if Tan Zhongyi had a minute on the clock for the last, the 19 moves, but here Tan Zhongyi has now a 24. I mean, it's incredible that she's barely spent any time to get to this winning position. For Goryachkina, it's only 42 minutes left. She still has to make 20, 20 moves until the extra time kicks in. So that's a further element. I think it's not a big element, but it's an element which makes it even more unlikely uh, that she can find anything here to turn the situation around. Screws is asking, how does it feel from the other side? Would Tan find it hard to believe that she has such a good position so early in the game? What are your thoughts on that, Anna?
I mean, she may be surprised, but I think what the key is here to not get too excited and
Mm-hmm.
simply still make the best moves and don't let your emotions like take over. Even if you're like feeling so confident. I remember once I had a really good preparation against someone. It was going to be the perfect game because typically preparation doesn't really go so well. But this one time, my entire preparation was on the board. It was following a game that was shown as an example where you're winning so quickly and it's all really obvious that you're winning. But because I was so happy and so excited that I was ahead so
Mm-hmm.
quickly, I was vulnerable to a lot of threats and managed to lose a completely winning position. So you have to be really careful. And here we see the full camera. Tan Zhongyi is sitting down as Alexandra played Rook C7. Let's see if she has a response to it very soon.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We from the chat, I think, could make out that Bishop D8 is probably the best engine move. I agree with you. I think the key here, well, big, as a big put in the foot, the key is to make the best move. That's, of course, always the key. But I also agree absolutely with what you were saying. The key is just to not get carried away. I think,
Mm-hmm.
she has so much time on the clock. There is no need to rush from here on out. Um, but I'm not too concerned. I don't know Tanzani personally, so I can't judge, her character or how she deals with
Mm-hmm.
being in this kind of situation. But to me, the fact alone that she was a women's world champion and she won that title in a World Cup, and I think if you get through the whole World Cup, such a grueling format, you play there for a month, two mini matches in classical, then the time control. I think if you come out as the winner from that, it's a pretty good sign that you have, good control of your nerves, that you have
Mm-hmm.
um, a lot of, that you're good under pressure. I think if you're not good under pressure, it's very close to impossible to win the World Cup. Um, so I think I'm not too concerned for Tan Zhongyi here that she's going to make the mistake of rushing to victory or getting too excited, getting carried away. And I think even the fact, that she walked away from the board took a little walk. Like I think all of those are things because I'm sure emotions are running high.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to. I mean, we're humans, we're not robots. Like of course, there are emotions, and she must be surprised, and she must. She's now so close to this final match against Lei Tingzhe. Um, and we'll see, but I think she will take the full point
Yeah,
and remain in
absolutely.
control.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you. We saw in the tiebreaks that she had nerves of steel and she was holding on so well. She was ahead on the clock so much and she used her time so accurately. I mean, the times that she would be winning and she would still have 15 minutes on their clock, she was spending her time very well and making sure she spends the time when needed to convert the position to a full point, or make sure she doesn't lose. And yeah, she managed her time so well. So I think I also think she will not rush things here. Make sure she's playing precise moves and yeah, take the full point because this position is looking very promising for her.
Absolutely, and I would say let's bring back the board and let's have a look at this rook c7 move, which was just played by Alexandra, and try and figure out. So we were already told by Jet that bishop d8 is an option. It's a kind of position where it's hard to believe that bishop d8 would be the only. But let's start with that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also because it's bishop d8 at least makes our job a little bit easier because we are attacking the black rook, so there should be less options for black to respond.
Yeah, I'm failing to see. I mean, to me, the only square available to the rook is c6, and if I don't move my rook, I'm simply losing the rook. And I guess you have the opportunity to take this knight, but I would prefer not to play this line with the black pieces. I mean, bishop takes, and this bishop is still stuck. You have to move it,
Mhm.
and this pawn goes to c6, and this knight doesn't have many square left either. So this should simply be losing on the spot. But I don't see any other move. Do we simply go for rook c6?
I mean, I don't see how to save the rook except for rook c6. So
Yeah,
let's
we
see,
were
rook
also
c.
discussing knight b8,
Knight b8. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay,
which
let's
is a
look at
really
that again.
desperate. Yeah, but
Hmm.
it doesn't look good at all. I mean, you're saving the position in a way, but this rook is still in huge trouble. The pawn is still on c5 and wants to move forward. So I'm not too convinced just yet.
Let's see. We were saying queen takes a3.
Right, yeah.
Rook c8, I think, in the end, the engine dropped less.
Okay, yeah.
So what is this? We're currently up a piece, but both our pieces are under attack.
Yeah, I think c takes b6 is interesting.
Hmm. Let's have a look at that. It's a move that seems to make a lot of sense.
Yeah, because idea is obviously b takes a7 and we want to
Mhm.
queen, so we don't really care about our pieces hanging. But yeah, if you simply capture here, um, what do we do about these two pieces is the
I
question.
noticed that the bar has already dropped quite a bit on us, which just
True.
which just tells you, like, it's easy for us here with the evil bar to say, yeah, she'll keep her calm. The position is winning. Maybe it's not quite as easy as it seems because so where did we manage this? The engine. I liked your suggestion of taking on b6. The engine liked it a bit less. So let's see what are some other.
Yeah,
Could
maybe it's not
bishop?
so
What about
resourceful to take
what
right
about
away.
bishop? Bishop takes b6.
I guess pawn takes and you still have a knight on d2
Oh,
hanging.
what am I saying? Okay, now let's go back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, you're definitely losing one of the pieces, so you need to find a way where you take as many pawns as you can,
What
and
about queen
then
a7?
okay.
Just take a pawn immediately.
After rook takes d8, I guess we have queen takes b6. So, and if queen takes d2, we can take with the bishop. I guess this is the way to go.
Yeah, because now we are going to keep at least some of the pawns. So let's say queen takes d. I think rook d8 is just not possible, right? Because
Yeah.
queen b6 looks
Mm-hmm.
crushing. And
And
here,
now, I guess bishop takes b6. You do lose the pawn on d4, but I guess this pawn goes really fast forward.
mhm. So after queen takes d4, we keep an extra pawn, but yeah, also the c pawn. Can we? Yeah, let's try a move. Can we just push it immediately?
I'm thinking, do I want to push or play maybe queen
Hmm.
b7? It's there's a lot of options, I would say. I would want to play queen b7 so that if the rook moves, I get to play c6, c7, and queen as fast as possible. But maybe there are some consequences to this. What if we play c6 right away? Is there any way we get punished here or we have to deal with some problems? Let's say queen d6. I guess c7 and queen b7, and it's hard to defend.
Yeah, even once again, I like your idea of starting. Although no, now I cannot start with queen b7 because you'll take the pawn. Okay, so
Yeah.
c7,
Yeah, and if
knight.
knight d7, queen... Ah, okay, you have to be careful. There's knight takes
Yeah.
b6. Okay, I guess I'll just play bishop a5 and
But
defend.
even yeah, this looks good. Could we even go queen b7 anyway after knight takes b6, rook b1, or does that not? No,
Oh, I guess
because
there's
I
rook
also
takes
have
c7 and back
background.
rank.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's so many tactics still in the position, so you have to play really carefully.
Yeah, but your move bishop a5, just keeping defending the pawn seemed good. Good enough.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to show black still has some resources, so
Hmm.
you have to play really carefully here, and that's also why Tanjungi is spending some time here. Well, first of all, she has a lot of time, and second of all, there's no rush. She has a really good position, she's aware of it, and you have to make sure to not spoil that. And I see her move a piece. What did she move? She played
She
bishop
didn't
to
play.
d3.
Yeah, it was not bishop d8.
I mean, this makes sense, as in bishop d8 feels like the bishop is very vulnerable over there. Why not bishop g3 instead? The reason why I didn't like bishop g3 was because of e5 potential moves and helping black to consolidate, maybe. But perhaps e5 is, not good enough.
Well, maybe e5 is the only. No, I was thinking because if not e5, I mean the rook once again only has
One square,
c6
right.
available, and I mean knight b8 here cannot surely. Surely not. No, I mean there we just take on a3 and all the black pieces are hanging. So I think knight b8 here is
Right.
not an option.
Mm-hmm.
The only square for the rook is c6,
Then we can
unless
play queen b7 and trap it. And e5 has
yeah,
been played. There we go.
yeah. I think e5
Hmm.
looked like the only move.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you're attacking the pawn on d4. Obviously, you're not able to capture it anytime soon because the rook is still hanging, but it's hard for white to capture it. This pawn on c5 is very vulnerable, so it looks like there's still some chances for black to come back, but obviously, this is being very hopeful for black. I don't expect anything crazy to happen here, but yeah, for the time being, this bishop on a3 is still very sad. What move could white possibly play here?
Well, the bishop on a3, not only is it very sad, it's also, of course, under attack, as is the knight on d2. So if we had a way to save that knight with it, oh, she's okay, a fast move, knight
Oh,
f3.
oh, she played knight f3. Okay, yeah, there we see it on the live board as well. I mean, she's saving the knight, and I guess she's also attacking the pawn on e5 indeed. And black needs to figure out now how to save this bishop because you don't have many squares left.
Hmm.
And yeah, you can consider taking that pawn, but I'm pretty sure that will not go unpunished.
Yeah,
So
queen a2 is hard to. Well, let's have a look. It's hard to believe that it will. This would work.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's knight takes e5. This pawn is moving fast. I think knight takes e5 is the problem. And after knight takes, bishop takes, this rook has to move
Hmm.
c6, bishop d6 also to attack the bishop, which is pinned right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, yeah, queen takes a2 would be a little bit too greedy. But what else? I guess bishop b4 then. Hmm. Do we play a3
Yeah,
already
I
or
was
do we
wondering
wait?
about that. I was also wondering, are there any double attacks? Because all the black pieces feel so loose. The bishop on b4 is undefended, that rook is undefended. Let's see a3. You move.
Yeah, a3, bishop a5, and yeah, I want to take on e5. I can
Hmm.
always take on e5.
Yeah, I like this. I mean, it's looks quite simple, but quite effective.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And maybe including a3 is not so ideal because after bishop a5, at least the bishop is
Hmm.
defending the pawn. So maybe we take
I
on
would
e5
just take
first,
immediately. Yeah.
and then we're going for that pawn.
And
And we simply have two more pawns.
yeah, this looks pretty clean, I would say.
Yeah, so Knight of Three, I really like this move. It's a very calm and not very provocative move, but it does its job, and it's showing how bad this bishop is on A3. So there's a lot of problems in Black's position. There is no big material difference just yet, but I have a feeling that we will see this in the next few moves.
I see in the chat one Lord God is saying now it is time for Goryachkina to finally give up the peace and hope for some compensation. So I wonder if he's referring to just taking. I mean, we've talked so much about how powerful that pawn on c5 is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I guess what he means is just taking that pawn. Let's have a look at that.
Yeah, let's see which way is good because I mean, there's many ways you can take.
Yeah,
I guess
it's
bishop
true.
takes c5, b takes c5. There's even knight takes, but preferably I want to keep the knight. Somehow it feels like this knight can make magic happen.
Yeah.
And obviously takes d4, you lose the rook on c7, so we cannot
Hmm.
afford that. I guess b takes c5 comes to mind because after queen takes a3, there's c takes d4, and yeah, the pawns may look scary, but I guess knight takes
Knight
e5, and
takes.
you're quickly losing the pawns
Yeah.
actually.
So this is a what about so I agree with you, not knight takes, so that leaves only bishop takes.
Yeah, let's see. Bishop takes. Yeah, we'll take that, of course.
Mhm.
And yeah, I guess you have rook takes c5 now to defend the pawn
Maybe
on e5.
maybe queen takes, because if rook takes
Oh.
a7 is hanging, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And bishop takes
Actually,
c5 has been
yeah.
played.
So maybe this time, maybe the alternatives. I think the c pawn we were talking about, maybe the alternatives were just too terrible.
Yeah, and this looks like the best move to go for, because all the other moves were simply not helping out. And yeah, you have to do what you have to do. I mean, there's not much else you can go for, and um, she can still pull off a miracle, I would say. It's still possible, and Tanjoki needs to play really precisely to be able to win this because it's not so easy. You know, you're a
Yeah.
piece, you will be a piece up, but your opponent still has some counterplay, I would say.
I have to say, I mean, I thought that the position was winning more easily than
Mm-hmm.
this. It's probably still winning, but yeah, a lot less clear than I thought it was. So let's see if White. I mean, White has the fact that she hasn't recaptured the bishop yet makes me think maybe there's some intermediate moves, but
Right.
no, she goes. She has now taken on c5.
Yeah. Yeah, it didn't seem like there were other moves.
No.
She was maybe considering some captures on e5, but d takes e5 is a very obvious move to play.
And knight takes is on the board.
Okay.
Yeah, that knight we thought was gonna stay put on d7 has gone to c5. Guess there
Yeah,
were maybe issues with other captures.
yeah. Now we see the full cam. Oh, we briefly saw the full camera, and yeah, it was I was going to point out the clock difference because Alexandra is on 38 minutes, whereas Tan Zhongyi is still over an hour. And
Hmm.
the times that I have faced these kind of situations, I would always be very, very intimidated and, very displeased because what am I doing wrong? But obviously, Alexandra had a really tough position and still has. But even before that, Tan Zhongyi was playing so fast, and the moment she's winning, she's spending her time, which is really interesting to see.
Yeah, I think it's very instructive and something that we can all learn from. Let's um, let's take a moment now to take in the position has changed so much. Sorry, apologies. The position has
No
changed
worries.
so much um, from what we saw uh, up until now. We saw, those dangerous white pawns. They are gone, but white has an extra piece.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the other factors? The pawn on e5 is still weak, but I imagine that will, on the next move, either be pushed or defended. For now, white has to figure out what she wants to do with the queen. How much compensation do you think Alexandra has for the piece?
I think quite a lot because, once black plays a move like f6, which looks rather strange, I'm failing to see how to activate this bishop. Of
Hmm.
course, the move f6 will come with some consequences, and this knight will be able to play on the light squares perhaps, but I do have to admit, it's not so easy for white to push here for a win. And we do have to note that this pawn on a2 is also being attacked by the queen, and as soon as black is able to consolidate on the queen side, if black manages to get the passed pawn, there are
Hmm.
some serious drawing chances there. For the time being, this is being very hopeful, and it will mean that Tanjoki is not doing anything to improve her position. But currently, if we look at the position, knight c5 was played. I would say queen b5 looks really appealing to me to simply try to go for a check
Hmm.
and play active moves because that's what you need here. You have to play actively and make sure you don't give your opponent time to reconsolidate.
Yeah, I like queen b5 as well. In fact, the more I was looking at the position, I think there are only two options, right? Queen b5 and
Right?
queen a3. She's gone for queen a3, which,
Okay.
while it doesn't threaten to come into e8 with a check, it keeps the pawn a2 defended, and it also maybe prepares rook c1 just to
Mm-hmm.
activate, bring that last piece into the game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for now, black has to answer how to. Black cannot afford, I think, to lose the pawn on e5. And
Yeah, exactly.
is there
So
any
f6
other
comes to
way?
mind. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nothing else comes. It's
Yeah,
hard to find another
exactly.
route.
Yeah, I mean, you can always think of moves like knight d3 to defend, but this pawn is attacked two times, so I think you will have to resort to f6. I don't see any other move. You can think of moves that are attacking, but I don't see them for black currently. And also, the move f6 I really like for the simple reason that you're blocking this bishop on g3 a
Mhm.
lot. It is facing this pawn on e5 and doesn't really have a lot of mobility on the king side. So white will need to be really creative to get this bishop to a more active square, for example, to e3 preferably.
Mhm.
But unfortunately for Tanjungi, bishops do not move like that, so they will stay there for a while probably.
Yeah, I was wondering actually, while you were talking, I was wondering also how do I want to activate that bishop as f6 appears on the board. I don't know, is the only way I could think of, at least for now, is to move the knight away from f3, play f3 ourselves, and then bring the bishop back via f2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's gonna take some time. But at the same time, Black doesn't really have a lot of moves, so you can definitely afford to spend some time. But I really like the move that you mentioned earlier, Rook C1. Start off with that. Make sure that, you know, the Rook is pinning this knight
Mhm.
one way or the other. And then you can think of moving the knight F3, Bishop F2. I really like this maneuver. And yeah, we'll have to see how Alexander will respond because with this queen on a3, it looks really odd over there. But at the same time, it is also annoying for black because there are no real entry points. It's
Mhm.
really hard to push the pawns on the queen side because every time you push those pawns, something will get weakened and the pawns get vulnerable as well. So yeah, this is definitely still looking tough for Alexandra, but maybe there are some chances to equalize. Maybe.
Yeah, I think objectively the position must be winning for white,
Mm-hmm.
but there are some practical chances for black. So I really think the onus is now on Tanjong. I think Alexandra, I'm impressed with how she handled, being hit with this shock. Even if I said earlier, Rook C8, I mean, Rook C8 was the first mistake, and then Queen A4 was apparently, not the best. But
Mm-hmm.
after those two moves, looks like she has played the best. The best choices at every turn since. And I think she must be happy. I saw it in not happy. I mean, I'm sure she's the furthest thing removed from happy. But I saw in the chat someone said, to the untrained eye, Goryachkina's position looks so much more comfortable than a few moves ago. And someone responded, actually, that is true to the trained eye as well. And I agree. I mean, the position we saw a few moves ago, if we remember, all the black pieces were just so horribly placed. They were undefended. The white pawns looked so threatening. So, yes, I mean, it's a piece now. Let's not forget a piece is a piece after all. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but there is no more, the white pieces are suddenly, especially the bishop, you're just highlighting quite out of play. And it looks like it will take a little bit of time for white to regroup. So I think she has to be happier with this position, and she probably understands there are some practical chances. Um, so yeah, as I think I started by saying that I'm overall quite impressed with how she handled it, because it was a position where it was very easy to just collapse and
Mm-hmm.
lose on the spot. So she's managed to survive, those critical moments where you could just lose immediately. And now I think, as I was saying, that the onus is on Tang Zhongyi. I think if she finds, all the best moves from here on out, I think she will win this game. And if not, then I think Alexandra will have chances to get back into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I absolutely agree with you, and it's so interesting to see how resourceful Alexandra is. I mean, as we were making some of the moves, we were trying some moves left and right, and they were all just not great, and they all seem very logical, but it's so easy to go from worse to even worse position. And the fact that Alexandra got to this position is really showing her strength because she's not giving up and she knows she still has a shot at a draw. So she's rightfully trying to go for that.
Absolutely. And well, Tanzhongyi is thinking now, which is a good time for us to go on a break. So we'll be going on a break. We'll be back in a few minutes with this final classical game of Pool B semi-final. So don't go anywhere and come back to find out, can Tanzhongyi win this game? We'll see you in a few.
Just played an exciting game and want to see if you got a brilliancy? Or maybe where you could have improved? Chess.com's game review is just a click away. Game review is a fast, fun, and instructive guided review of your games. see your accuracy and your opponent's accuracy. Check out the eval graph for an instant overview and scroll down to see how many great moves, best moves, blunders, and yes, brilliancies you have played. Learn from Chess.com's coach who gives move explanations, opening statistics, and shows you the best lines of play. With retry mistakes, you can get another shot at finding missed opportunities. Try Game Review today on web, iOS, or Android.
Hello and welcome back to the Women's Candidates coverage brought to you by Chess.com. If you're just joining us now, it's been a very eventful game 4 of the semi-final of Pool B between Tan Zhongyi and Alexandra Goryachkina. Tan Zhongyi is up a piece in the current position. The question is, will she be able to convert it? And here to bring you all the action are myself, Fiona Steil-Anthony, and Unayam Anamaya Kazarian. Anamaya, maybe, as I said, for all the people who might have joined us during the break, how would you sum up what's been happening so far in this game 4?
Yes, Fiona, it's been wild. At the start of the game, Tan Zhongyi was able to make a tactic on the board and put pressure on Alexandra's position, and she got a huge advantage very early on. And as it seems like now, Alexandra is able to find her way out, and it seems like she can still, maybe there's a chance to consolidate and bring it back for her to equalize it. But for the time being, Tan Zhongyi is doing well. So I'm really curious to see how the game continues.
Absolutely, me too. We'll jump back into the game in just a second. But before we do, let's have a look at probably my favorite event of the year, which is coming up at the end of this month. And if you've been loving our coverage of the women's candidates, you are not going to want to miss the FIDE Women's World Rapid Chess Championship, one of the most highly coveted titles in over-the-board chess. Many of the world's best speed chess players will go head-to-head for the championship, including Alexandra Kosteniuk, Katerina Lagno, Tan Zhongyi, and Alexandra Goryachkina, so the two players we are following right now. The event begins Monday, December 26th, and you can catch all the action here at Twitch TV/chess. Type !rapid in chat for all the details.
Very exciting event. Have you participated in this event yourself, Fiona?
No, I've always taken a spectator seat. I actually am off next weekend to the European Rapid and Blitz, which I played in once, and it was such a night. I was just looking it up the other day. And so I played the European Blitz Championship in 2017. And just to paint a picture of the scene, so there's over 1,000 players. It's absolutely huge. The way it worked at the time, the pairings come out, there's 1,000 people going to check the pairings. There's no ratings. You just see a table number. You go to a table and you play 2 games against your opponents. And I just played almost only against kids. And I had no idea what their ratings were, you know. I just got so many lessons on that day that I didn't even play the Rapid the next day. I was just so horrified. And when I came home, when the next rating was calculated, I lost 140 points. Like, almost all my opponents were rated more than 400 points lower than me. So I was like, okay.
No.
That's enough Rapid and Blitz for me for a few years. I'll switch to just commentate. I know. So I, take a spectator seat, watch the best, battle it out, and enjoy it from a safe distance.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a very enjoyable event. Lots of fireworks, lots of drama. So it's definitely fun to watch. And yeah, playing yourself, I mean, you can have a good tournament, but if you play against kids, they are often very underrated. And especially in Rapid and Blitz time controls, I mean, they can be crazy good and not have had played many tournaments. So their rating might be inaccurate. And that's the worst.
I mean, I'm not that old yet, but my brain just works, a little bit slower than theirs. What about you? Will you be playing in Almaty?
Unfortunately, this time I won't be playing. Instead, I'm playing in a Dutch championship. So it was an easy pick for me. I played last time in the World Rapid and Blitz. It was my first time. That was a great experience. But I managed to lose rating in the Blitz while I feel like I'm underrated. So that was not fun. I had a very good win in the first round, and then after that it went just downhill, and I wish the tournament stopped at round 1. But yeah, there were many more rounds after that. But it was a very cool experience just being
Yeah.
in the same playing hall as all those top players, and yeah, seeing them fight against each other. It was really inspiring to see them in action live.
Absolutely. And well, I'll be here, but I'm looking forward to following you in the Dutch Women's Championship and the World Rapid and Blitz. For
Thank
now,
you.
we have a big game here on our hands. So let's dive back into it.
Mm-hmm.
During the break, I think Tanzania actually took quite a long think. She fought for 12 minutes before playing Rook C1, one of the
Right.
moves we had talked about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Alexander followed up with Queen G6, which is apparently not favored by Engine as the bar spikes up. And I'm actually having a hard time seeing why this is so bad because this knight on c5 is very well defended. I don't see anything happen with that just yet. And at the same time, this pawn chain over here is so strong. It feels like you cannot counter it. And at the same time, I don't see how you can attack the opponent. I mean, you have no check available since this is covered by the knight. I don't see if you can make any sort of sacrifices. The only issue I'm seeing right now is
Mhm.
that maybe there are opportunities like knight h4, and you want to aim for those light squares with the knight because they're very weak over here.
Yeah, I think that's all true. Maybe another issue is just the pin along the C file,
Mm-hmm.
because the knight can only ever move to A6 or E6, where it would defend the rook. And I feel like a rook exchange is definitely not in black's favor. Of course, white has to always watch out for back rank mates. I think I've managed to miss one of them earlier already. But I feel in general for black, swapping those rooks is not something she wants to do because a7 would become so vulnerable. And also, as we have the next move on the board, knight h4, which you were just talking about, I see that the one Lord God was saying, what is the future of Goryachkina's queen over there on g6? Sad emote. And saying actually rook d7 after rook c1 would have been so cool, which is a move that our producer Vic asked us about during the break. So maybe we can come back to that in a second. But for now,
Mm-hmm.
let's first have a look at the move on the board, knight h4, and see where will the black queen go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, knight h4 is a very logical move in the sense that you want to make use of those light squares, and probably on the next move we'll see queen f3, knight f5, and it can get really dangerous around the black king. Also, queen a3 might be an idea,
Mhm.
and you're simply playing around those pieces. It feels like this whole queen side is set in stone, but the light squares are so weak, and you have to play on those to make improvements in your position. So yeah, knight h4 now, and with this move, you're also saving some time because you want to move the knight anyway. So after knight
Mhm.
h4, f3 also comes to mind. Bishop f2, the moves we were talking about earlier to improve the position of this bishop and potentially trade it for this knight.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those plans. I think actually, I was talking earlier about both sides having to play the best moves to either keep the position in the balance for Goryachkina or for white to keep the advantage. But I think it's a position where it's so difficult to find the best computer moves, and that's why I think we will probably see the bar, go up and down. Not, not in terms of blunders, but just up and down a bit because um, it's a position that's still very rich, where there's a lot of different plans, where there's a lot of different squares for the pieces, and I think it's a position where it's far from obvious to understand where do the pieces belong. We saw that knight g6, the bar jumped a bit. Knight h4, it came down a bit again. Uh, Both moves which looked quite natural at first, and I think even the next decision, it's the same thing. It's not so obvious to me. Okay, maybe we can just first check where can the queen, what are even candidate squares for the queen.
Yeah, I guess the one move that comes to mind is Queen G5 to attack this rook and keep the queen attached to it. I was also going to say Queen F7. There was also Queen H5, but Queen F7 does feel like one of the more safe options. And yeah, you still keep an eye on those squares in a way. But yeah, after Queen F3, I was going to say that the Queen F3 looks really appealing to me, but you do
Mhm.
drop the pawn on A2. So in that sense, Queen F7 is also pretty resourceful. I would want to play moves like F4 here, but perhaps that's a little bit too crazy. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, I like I like F4. Because I do think that one of the keys for white is to reactivate this bishop on G3 as we talked about. So far we had only talked about F3, but now that you point out F4, I'm like, oh, it's very interesting. I guess we have to make sure that after if black goes E4, that pawn doesn't become a problem.
Right. Yeah, let's
Let's
maybe
make
put
the
it on the
move.
board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Let's see what happens after F4. Because the reason why I'm skeptical about this move is because it feels so weakening the position. The king
Hmm.
is a little bit exposed. The bishop and knight feel very loose. So yeah, after e takes F4, bishop takes F4, it feels like black can get some action going on
What
in the
about the
position.
immediate? What about the immediate no, G5? Okay, the rook is under attack. Okay. No, so after takes, black has to do something about the rook. I saw someone in
Right.
chat saying that the rook would really like to go to D7. I agree. I mean, black, of course, would love to use those open files, so maybe rook D7 here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it becomes hard to see where those pieces are
Hmm.
heading to. I mean, G5 is a threat, for sure. And knight on F5 doesn't feel so good anymore. And it's crazy to see how much of a difference one pawn can make. Because with
Hmm.
the pawn F2, knight F5 seemed a bit more logical. And now that the king is so exposed, it feels so vulnerable. And there's all sorts of attacks possible, like knight to D3. This queen can come out and give a check, and it becomes very tough to see how white can easily continue from here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as much as, we might get enthused about a move like F4, we have to be a bit careful to not leave ourselves with too many weaknesses, not leave our king too open, not leave our pieces too loose. So if not F4, is F3. Oh, but F3, my knight is dangerously running out of squares already.
True, but you can still get to F5.
Mhm.
It does feel very scary, but as long as I still have my square F5, I'm okay.
Yeah, the engine did not like it one bit. I don't know, what is it? Maybe just rook d7 again and black just
Right.
gets
Oh,
active. I
F3
don't
and
know.
rook d7. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's the scary part. Black can
Mhm.
get really active, and you have to be careful with weakening your king. This knight is also pretty strong over here. It can always jump to d3 when needed. Queen comes to d5. Queen d2 can come up, and yeah, you have to find a way to untangle your pieces because the pieces of white feel a little bit stuck. This queen doesn't
Mhm.
really have many squares on from a3 available. This rook is not doing much anymore on c1. Knight is on the edge of the board and is aiming for a nice square, but there's no follow up from there. And this bishop is trying to become active, but
Mhm.
it's a little bit slow, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have to say I've not been convinced by both attempts f3, f4. So let's try and look for something else.
Mm-hmm.
What about queen? Oh no, queen f3 was your first suggestion, and then a2 was
Yeah, I
hanging.
also missed that the pawn would be hanging. I was like, oh wow, we have to play precise here. But yeah, maybe simply rook d1, control the d file
Mhm.
yourself.
Yeah, I like that suggestion. Let's see, rook t1.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's really hard to see how to continue with white I mean, I guess we have to see first what black can do here, but the question, I guess, is who would prefer to trade rooks? And it's hard to say because the more pieces are traded off, you would say that the person that is ahead material would have an easier time. But we see such an interesting material imbalance here. Black has 2 pawns, and white has the extra piece. But this extra piece is not really doing much. And as soon as white doesn't do, being careful, it becomes really hard to see how he can deal with those pawns because I can see those pawns become
Mhm.
strong in the end game.
Yeah, for sure. And did she just play Rook D1
Yeah, Rook
before?
D1 has
No?
indeed been played. Wow.
Yeah, Rook D1 I think makes a lot of sense, just taking that control over the D file. For now, potentially looking to come into D8 if we get a chance.
Yeah, and that's a problem you have to deal with, Rook D8. You can defend it by playing knight E6 and avoid trading rooks, but this feels like you're allowing white to become very active. Knight F5 looks
Mhm.
really appealing, queen can suddenly jump to D6. So, yeah, how do you deal with this? Because Rook D8 seems like quite a serious threat. Maybe not at the moment, as in after King H7, there's no direct follow up, but it feels really dangerous. The fact that there is a rook on the 8th
Mhm.
rank, pretty much unstoppable. And once the queen gets involved in the attack, I think black should start worrying.
Yeah, exactly. I think especially because that diagonal from B1 to H7, right now the queen cannot get on that diagonal because T3 is protected by the knight, but it only takes 2 moves. I mean, Queen B1, Queen B2, Queen B1. And I think if we imagine, so let's say, let's make a pass move for black, I don't know, A6. Um, just to illustrate, if we, as I was thinking even to start with the check on the
Oh, yeah,
8th,
right.
get the king out, and let's say queen b2. And I think if queen b1 happens, then black has to go, okay, here there are some concrete problems, I guess. But my point is just if black has to play g6, suddenly the position looks so loose with that open 7th rank. I think here the problem is probably some back rank issues. I guess knight d3 and rook c. No, knight d3 we can take.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Uh,
93 doesn't work, but there seems to be a serious threat here. Maybe involving g5 or it's actually surprising to see that there's a direct win here
we have to
and it's not
solve
so
this.
straightforward. Yeah.
I was even thinking, some knight d3, rook takes, and queen takes a2, but surely not.
Actually, you're making a really good point. I'm not seeing how white can defend it. Let's put it on the board. Knight d3 and queen takes a2. And I don't see how he can stop the back
Oh
rank
wow,
checkmate. So I think you spotted that
that's
very well.
crazy. Because I was just thinking, if it's losing, it must be to do with the back rank,
Mm-hmm.
and then these sort of motifs come to mind. But yeah, to think that there's no defense here, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I were white, I would also really think about playing h3 quite soon,
Right.
just to not have to deal with any of those thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. H3 is a very useful move, and especially because you want to put pressure on your opponent, it's a good idea to keep your king safe because you need all the pieces to start an attack. And
Mhm.
yeah, that means leaving your first rank behind.
Absolutely. Meanwhile, I mean, it's not so obvious. What does black do next after rook d1? Because I had,
Right.
just made a pass move to show my point, but mm, of course, Alexandra doesn't want to make a pass move, but on the other hand, it's not so obvious. How do we improve the position for black?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, obviously, you don't want to trade rooks here. That will make things maybe a bit easier for white, I would say.
Mhm.
So Yeah, I don't expect that move to be played, but indeed, rook d8 is a threat, and I don't see how you can actually stop that. And we also have a question in the chat: why not f3? Seems like would free the bishop. Um, the problem is at the moment, if you play f3 already, you will face rook d7, and it may be really difficult for you to deal with this position since black is controlling this d file and has a lot of entry points. Along the d file. You can go to d2, you can go to d3, and it becomes a little bit dangerous. So we're not in a rush yet to save this bishop or improve it. Instead, we want to make sure that black doesn't have counterplay any sort of in any way. And then we can consider moves like f3, bishop f2, and continue from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the control over the d file is one thing, but also even though after f3 the knight still has the f5 square, I'm always a bit wary about taking away the only backward square of my knight, because it's very easy to see the knight suddenly, if we play f3, suddenly g6 appears, and the knight has no more squares. So that's another factor, I think, um, for not going for f3 immediately. I think if the knight gets away from h4, I think f3 absolutely is a plan that white has in the future. I think just as Anna Maya was pointing out, there's no need to rush with it and go for it immediately.
You know what I also really like is maybe we combine the two ideas of playing f4 and h3. So we start by playing h3, and at the right time, maybe follow it up with f4. So you open the position a little bit, but your king will always remain safe on h2. So this could be a potential idea, and it will also be slightly easier to attack on the king side. However, I do want to keep the pawn structure as it is right now because of the weak light squares. And it feels like with the pawn e5, we're proving this point even more. So you just want to make sure that you time such moves very carefully and well. So yeah, we'll have to see how the game continues. But for now, Alexandra needs to make a move. And as you mentioned, I'm also failing to see how you can actually continue from here. There's not really a lot of moves in the position that make a lot of sense.
And I see there was an interesting comment in the chat a bit that was made a short while ago by Perenai Barra, who's saying, without pushing the queen pawns, black is inevitably losing. You have to get counterplay, which makes me wonder, I was saying, oh, let's make a pass move to show my point about a6, but maybe a6 is not the worst, to just try and get the pawns rolling. A6, b5. Problem is, once you go b5, the knight again becomes so loose. So I agree with the sentiment of getting those pawns rolling, but it's not so easy to achieve.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes it really difficult for black as well. There's not a lot of moves left in the position. It feels like any move you make is a weakness. You don't want to, commit yourself to that. And yeah, if you have to resort to waiting moves, that's also not a good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, let's try and find what did, when I made a6, what did the engine? Let's make a6 on the board. Okay, it didn't
It
hate
didn't change really, so
No.
it seems like it's a great move.
Yeah, so a6. Okay, I'm not sure about great. I'm not sure there is any great moves for black in the position, but I assume the idea must be to follow
b5.
it up with b5 eventually. I see
Yeah,
there's another.
maybe knight a4 or knight e4 to go to c3 perhaps. There's ideas like that.
Yeah, for sure. I see another question in the chat. Only plan for black is trying to trade queens, ask Paulos. I don't know how I feel about black. Okay, we can try to make a queen trade happen. So instead of a6, let's say queen c4. And let's say queen c1 trade. Just to have a look at the position. I mean, not concretely, but just to imagine a
Hmm.
position without the queens on, with the queens off. Who do you think benefited from this queen trade?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Naturally, you would say that when you're ahead pieces, you want to trade pieces, so the more you trade, easier it gets. But you have to keep in mind that your opponent still has some sort of chances for counterplay. And I think it's very easy to say that White should still be better here and should be okay with the piece trade, the queens being off the board. But it's also really hard to really make progress because there's a pawn a2 that is not really able to do much. It's hard for white to create a pass pawn, and it doesn't feel like in the next two moves we can actually launch an attack with the white pieces to win some of the pawns back, because when you're ahead material, when you're ahead pieces, you want to capture those pawns and yeah, launch some attacks. But it's really hard to see how he can actually make that happen. Black's pawn structure is really well defended. So yeah, perhaps this makes it a little bit easier for Black to consolidate.
And it's funny that we're just talking about piece trades because that actually is what happened in the game. Not the queens were traded, but the rooks
Right.
have come off. After rook d1, Alexandra played rook d7 and Tan very quickly played h3. I'm a huge fan of h3, I have to say.
Me too. Yeah, it's a really resourceful move. You have to play it at some point. And okay, I guess right now there was a bigger reason for it because the back ring
Hmm.
thread was right there. But yeah, H3 is always a very reasonable move. Maybe not when there is a very critical position going on, but this is a perfect time to play it. And from there you can continue and once again make use of those light squares. So a move that I can see happen in the next few moves is Queen of 3.
I was looking at the same move and in my queen
Great.
f3, maybe knight f5, queen g4. Just
Hmm.
it's well known that the queen and knight is a great attacking pair. So I would also love to get those two pieces to get to work together on the king side, especially since with the black pawn structure being what it is, as we mentioned already a few times, the light squares are just very weak. So I think it's a plan we're both thinking of, and I'm sure it must also be a plan that Tan is thinking of.
Yeah, I agree. It makes a lot of sense that she wants to focus on those light squares. I'm curious if she will ever consider a move like f4, but I have to admit, if we play the move f4, we do allow e4. We mentioned this before, but it feels even more dangerous now, given that the rooks are off the board, so queen d1 checks are always in a position, and that helps black a little bit, I would say. So perhaps we're not going to see f4 anymore, or maybe not even f3 for the time being. But I can see queen f3, indeed, knight f5 being the plan. So knowing that, maybe we should think about what can black do to avoid this or improve their position.
Yeah, and there's actually a very concrete suggestion in the chat. So the question is go queen d1 check,
Mm-hmm.
king h2, and queen a4.
Okay.
So offering a queen trade.
Right, and the problem is, I guess, after trading the queens, there's always knight c3, and this pawn seems like it's not going to survive because black can keep attacking it, and there's simply no defense other than pushing it all the way to a5, pretty much. So, yeah, and since you're also not really able to play f4 right now, it's
Yeah,
hard to see how white can find any sort of winning plan here because the more pawns are being removed off the board, the harder it is for you to win the game.
absolutely. I think in this situation, I would absolutely not want to trade queens as white. I think one of the problems here is just if we look at the bishop on g3 and h4, the knight on h4, they just seem so far removed from the action on the queen side. And I mean, to be honest, if black picks up the a pawn, I would suddenly, if I was playing white, I would start to be worried about losing this game, even.
True. I mean, yeah, of course, since this pawn is about to drop here, those pawns on the queen side can become really strong. And indeed, those pieces are simply out of the game. And yeah, sure, you can play f3 and manage to develop the bishop still, but it's gonna take so much time. And I'm not sure if white does have this time.
Alexandra has made her move. It's not a move we had considered, but
Oh,
e4.
okay. That's rather surprising, given that we were considering this move after the move f4. But without the move f4, it makes sense that she wants to gain control over the light squares. But if she does that, the dark squares will then be the next problem. But I guess the move e4 is pretty interesting because she wants to play moves like queen d3. And we saw earlier that maybe queen trades are in favor of black. On the mission to try to equalize the position. But yeah, it seems like she's able to take a lot of space here.
Yeah, I actually, the more I look at e4, the more I like it. It's really restricting the movement of white's pieces, the knight on h4, also the queen we were talking about that wanted to go to f3. I saw a comment in the chat, someone saying that e4 was the best move. I mean, it looks like for the last short while, Alexandra has been able to find the best move at every turn, which is really impressive to do that when you're under so much pressure. I really still want to activate my queen as white. I'm trying to figure out how do I do it. I don't know if
Yeah, it's hard.
queen b2 or queen c1, but I'm not entirely sure. Maybe if I can go to c4 next. So let's say queen c1. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I think
thought
one
the
of the
buy might
problems.
drop, but not that much.
Yeah, I think the problem in this situation, obviously you do want to improve the position of your queen, but e4 is simply restricting this knight on h4, and you cannot go back to f3.
Is
You
a
cannot go to
threat.
f5, and indeed, g5 is a threat. So after queen c1, I'm sensing that g5 is a problem, and after knight g6, king g7, and I don't see any squares for the knight anymore. You'll have to give it up. So, yeah.
Okay, so there's actually a very concrete threat in the position here after e4, which we have to deal with. And how do we deal with it? Do we go
Maybe
knight
start?
g6? Yeah.
Maybe start with knight g6 so you can at least go to f4. But this also feels pretty uncomfortable. I mean, okay, I guess there's no queen f5 because of knight e7 check, so I don't expect that to happen.
No.
So what about, for example, king f7, just to not blunder anything. Knight f4. But I'm not a huge fan of this position. Like, again, g5, and the knight has to find the square. You cannot go to e2 because of queen d1 check. And if you have to go to h5, I don't know. It feels very, very concerning, actually, for white.
Yeah, I'm with you that I don't think this looks so great. The bar still gives white an advantage, of course. I mean, something really dramatic has to happen, like the way I just blundered my knight. And Screws is asking, could queen b2 help so that g5 would hang f6? Okay, that makes a lot more sense because I was saying queen b2 or queen c1, but I failed to see that if I go to b2 instead of c1, then indeed I am looking down at f6. So that's a nice suggestion.
Yeah, I like that as well. I mean, black is not really creating a pass pawn just yet, so if we can pick up some pawns on the king side, I don't think that's a bad idea. And this pawn is also falling, and suddenly the king side of white looks very strong.
Was maybe even bishop e5 instead of taking on h4 an option?
I lost the line completely.
So queen b2, e4.
Wait. It was e4 and then queen b2. Right. Okay, yeah, I have the line back again.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you press the wrong button. But yeah, bishop e5 indeed. And you're putting all sorts of threats over here.
And this, I mean, black has regained a piece, but oof, I mean, this looks very, very scary. And I see
I'm sorry, Fiona. The neighbors are having a fun time.
Oh, I can't hear. I can't hear
Really?
anything.
It's super loud. I'm like, whoa, that's right above my head.
They're having a party.
No, they're like drilling in the wall.
Oh, I can't hear anything.
You can't hear it? That's
No.
insane. Wow. I guess my
No.
microphone has a great noise canceling.
Yeah,
Because
it
it's
does.
right above my head. It's insane.
A really good mic. No, I can't hear anything at all.
Okay, thank God. I was getting concerned. Sorry.
No, I think this position, and I think Raziel in the chat was saying, I think in the worst case, Tan can always sack back a piece for 2 pawns, which I agree. They can hear it.
Oh, it's probably Discord being nice with the noise canceling then.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. I'm always like, I'm so bad with everything technology. So I'm just sitting here like, how can they hear it and I can hear it?
Yeah, Discord is known to you know, make it a bit more smooth and not have too much background noise. But yeah, this was really loud, so I was already surprised.
So back in the game, Tan Zhongyi is still thinking. So let's go back again to the current position on the board and look at Queen B2 a bit further because so
Yeah.
after E4, Queen B2. So I don't think Black should go G5. I think the line we looked at looked at least very scary for Black.
Yeah, so we were looking at the move G5 and that looks rather dangerous, but yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because we want to activate the pieces, but you also don't want to weaken your position. So I'm thinking of moves like Queen D1 and after King H2, Knight D3, but it's hard to see how to continue from there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering if Black can somehow at some point try and push E3, but I don't see how to make that happen anytime yet.
Yeah, and that's why it's hard to see how Black can continue from here. At the same time, you don't want to make too much like active moves, I would say, because at the same time, your king is also becoming weak over here. So
what if I just play, let's say, Queen D3? Just try and centralize my queen a bit. Potentially, say I'll potentially play E3, but just try and mostly I'm just trying to be a bit annoying, and I'm wondering what will White do next.
Yeah, I guess a good start would be to play Knight F5. Simply activate the knight, and I don't see how it can be attacked. So since the square is available, let's go there.
Yeah, and it's also looking at E3. I like Knight F5 a lot, actually.
Yeah, so after Knight F5, I mean, yeah, you don't really want to play moves like Knight A4. It feels like White is becoming very active with the knights all of a sudden. So after Knight A4, maybe a queen trade may happen, and then this knight becomes very active quickly.
Story, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because let's not forget that, of course, E4 has also opened up our bishop from G3, so it was certainly another decision that Goryachkina took lightly to help White, you know, just solve the problems of that bishop for her. Tan is taking, she's been thinking for almost 10 minutes here. Okay, if not Queen B2, what are some other candidate? moves.
Yeah, let's have a look. Yeah, so we also considered knight g6, but yeah, we were not too convinced by that. Feels like the knight is very loose still. But indeed, we saw that g5 is the problem for white, and one of the moves to deal with that was queen b2. Maybe do we have some improvement when it comes to that? So for example, queen c3 instead. Does it make any difference? Because like this, maybe we have queen c4 moves, type of moves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's always hard to see how to make progress here, right? For
I
both sides, I
know.
would say.
I know. So queen c3 rather than queen b2.
Yeah, maybe black can simply go for queen d5. Just
Just
centralize
and attack
and
a2.
attack.
Mhm.
Yeah. After knight g6, I'll simply play king f7. I'm not too concerned about that.
Yeah, I feel like I have to do something about the pawn on a2. I don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
But what? Is there any way I can go a4 and say you can't take it? But
um
I'm just thinking if I get into c8, do I get anything there? But I'm not sure I do.
Actually, maybe let's put on the board a4 and what if knight takes. I'm thinking maybe we have some tactics here, like queen c8 and knight f5, but
Mhm.
then I'm seeing moves like king f7, so yeah. Or maybe knight f5 still works. So let's put it on the board, knight f5, and yeah, knight e6 is the problem. And there's suddenly a lot of checks in the position, and
Mhm.
this king is very unsafe. So um I guess maybe knight takes a4 is a little bit unnecessary, and yeah, for that reason, a4 could be all right. But there is one move that we did not consider yet, queen
Uh,
d1, and picking up the pawn with the queen.
yeah, that's a solid reputation.
So yeah, that goes to show it's not so easy
No.
for white. I mean, we discussed queen b2, queen c3, but none of those moves really convinces that white is really having such a great position. I saw Chad was pointing out the bishop b8 move quite a few times, which is also interesting, but I'm having a hard time dealing with g5 move. I mean, you're picking up some pawns perhaps, but the question is it worth it?
Yeah, it's weird because bishop b8 loosens up again all the pieces. Suddenly, the bishop, the knight, none of the pieces are defended. Let's look at it. Let's see what happens after g5.
Yeah, it could be that you're just going to capture those
The save,
pawns
yeah.
and allow your knight to be captured, and black simply has a bad pawn structure, and you also have a passed pawn. So let's
But
say bishop takes here, and then pawn takes here, and bishop takes b6.
oh
Oh,
my
I
God,
missed
I
the simple
know.
tactic, queen d1. Oh
Queen d6.
goodness.
Um,
And queen d6, and suddenly the bishop is hanging. So
mhm.
okay, you have to be careful.
Yeah, I don't like just bishop b8, the look of it. Just
Same.
to, yeah. Okay, what about, I saw someone say, what about knight g6?
Yeah, we discussed this briefly.
Mm,
But I mean, the thing is, white wants to aim for a better position, and we established that after king f7, knight f4, this knight does not feel great. After g5, I'm not sure where the knight is heading to, because knight a2 is followed by queen d1 check, and after knight h5, I mean, it feels pretty awful over there. And
Yeah, I feel like, let's go
yeah,
back. I feel like maybe we're missing something here after g5
okay,
because the bar still seems to like it, but then after knight h5 it drops.
right.
But h5 seems to be the only square, which makes me think, what are we missing here?
It could be that you're simply allowing the capture and make use of the weak king position, but other than that, I'm failing to see how you can save the knight.
I mean, the problem is if you allow the capture, suddenly we're down a pawn even.
Yeah,
So,
that's a big issue.
We must solve this. I don't understand this position at all. Why is this still better for white?
Yeah. Yeah, let's see. So imagine, okay, we give up the piece. So queen e3, just, I mean, it may be a really silly move, but to just put it into perspective, after queen takes f4, the idea is to capture one of those pawns and then push one of the pawns forward. But yeah, after king g6, I'm failing to see how you can continue from there. So maybe we have a better way of sacrificing the piece, but capturing more pawns or being able to make something happen. Actually, I just got an idea, Fiona. What about knight e2? We're going to allow them to capture the knight, but the difference here is that we have queen takes a7 with check. The next move is queen takes b6.
Uh-huh.
So maybe this way we can try to fight for an advantage. But if I have to look at the position from, without, if I just not consider the engine whatsoever, I would not be so happy with my position with the white pieces, because look at those pawns on the king side. Just one f5, f4, and it's over.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, this position is so practical. It's really move by move. Like suddenly, all these plans and all of that goes out of the window because, so first of all, where will the black king go?
I
Because
guess king
G6
g6.
feels like where you want to hide, but after queen takes B6, suddenly F5 is out of the equation in the near future, and the knight is under attack. Depending on where the knight goes, white has some bishop E5 threats. So yeah, knight D3 makes sense, and I guess the idea is just A4 and use that outside pass pawn.
Yeah, exactly. And fortunately for white, the pawn f2 is defended. So yeah, this could lead to a very interesting position, but it's really difficult to make this decision because you're simply giving up the piece. And I mean, the nice part is when you're up a piece is that you can give it back for some material and still be enjoying an advantage. But it's so hard to firstly do that, and second of all, find a way to make it work and find the best way to sacrifice a piece if you're considering it. So yeah, would this actually happen? It may just happen that she is thinking about such lines because she has been spending over 17 minutes now on the clock, which, I mean, it's a lot of time.
Absolutely. It's, I think, her longest thing of the game by quite a distance. And I agree with you. It's so difficult to just get yourself to give the piece back. She's worked so hard to win the piece. But okay, let's see. We have him. I think it's bishop b8. Okay.
Wow,
bishop
it
b8
has been played. So seems like she heard the chat, the spirit of the chat.
Yeah.
And it has been played. It's rather surprising.
Yeah, bishop b8 was a move that I thought was quite unnatural. Let me even. What was our problem with bishop b8? Was it g5?
Yeah, g5 was one of the issues that I simply didn't like, because after knight g6 we're simply giving up the knight. Maybe you have moves like queen g3, but it doesn't feel right.
Absolutely. This is a big moment. What we are going to do, I'm sure Alexandra will take a little bit of time here to think of her response. G5 involves a lot of calculation. So we're going to go on a quick break, but things are once again heating up here. Could Alexandra be back in this game? We'll find out in just a few minutes, so don't go anywhere. We'll see you soon.
Any move can be the last you make. In a war of the mind, you must adapt to change. Every mistake made, an opportunity to strike.
Check.
And when the ashes settle, only one will be crowned the victor.
Checkmate.
Victory. Oh, Jesus Christ!
Hello and welcome back to game 4 of the semi-final of Pool Pool, Pool B of the FIDE Women's Candidates Tournament. And what a game we have. We've been taking you throughout this game, myself, Fiona Anthony, and Anamaya Kazarian. And Anamaya, I mean, we couldn't have hoped for a more exciting game. It looked like Tan Zhongyi was borderline winning out of the opening, but things haven't been that clear since.
Right, Fiona, it's been wild. The past few moves have been very tense because all of a sudden it's not so clear. I mean, Alexander has been defending super well, finding really resourceful moves, and it's on Tan Zhongyi to now convert this to a winning position. But it's not looking so clear, and we actually see that a few moves have been played before the break. We left off here after bishop b8 g5 was indeed played, and we did not consider this move, but queen takes a7 was played, Fiona, offering the trade of queens.
Yeah, very interesting. We talked about different ways of giving back the piece for white, but this is one way we had not considered. So let's just quickly see what would happen after queen trades. So if queen takes, bishop takes, takes on h4 and takes on b6, I think that's the simplest line that we have to consider because all moves there are quite forced. Material is suddenly even, but of course white has this huge passed pawn on the a file, and also black's pawns on the king side are really weak. I mean, especially the pawns on h6 and on h4.
Right.
And so the first question, I guess, would be to evaluate this ending.
Right, and it's interesting to see that this knight doesn't, I mean, it has a lot of squares available, but you want to stop this pawn from moving. So the obvious move to consider is knight a4. But after a move like knight a4, it's very common that when the knight is on the edge of the board, you can perhaps trap it. And this bishop can dominate the knight, and all of a sudden the knight is running out of squares, and all white needs to do is bring the king over to b3 and win. As soon as there's any sort of trade with the bishop and knight, it becomes much easier for white to convert this with the outside passed pawn. So for that reason, it becomes hard to see how you can stop the pawn from moving. So for example, if we consider move like knight to d3, I can already see this pawn move up so fast. And with the involvement of the king, as you mentioned, those weak pawns on the king side, it may be very difficult for black to hold here.
Yeah, in this endgame, my feeling tells me that it should be winning for white. Actually, there's another factor, an extra positional factor, is the clock times. We talked about them a bit earlier, but I think it's becoming a huge factor here again, because this is move 32, which means that Alexandra still has to make 9 moves, and she has only just over 12 minutes on the clock. And this is not a position where you can make 9 easy moves. Every decision here is crucial. I mean, I imagine that even the position she's in right now, her next move could be crucial. Whether she changes queens, whether, she captures that knight. I think her next move will change by definition, will change the position a lot. And I think if she had more time on the clock, I think very likely she would spend more than the 12 minutes that remain just on this moment here.
I agree with you. I mean, the very obvious move to consider is to trade, but what if we don't trade? Are there any moves here that can still help black to keep going and find a way to consolidate here? Because the pieces are so weirdly placed. I mean, this knight on c5 is pretty strong, I would say. So you want to consider moves like queen d1 check, and followed by knight d3. And what even happens after queen d1? Because I think that's one of the moves to consider. Because after king h2, what happens after the capture? I guess you can simply capture the pawn and...
Yeah, I think that's the pawn you want to capture, attacking f6 at the same time. And once again, I mean, if black doesn't, I mean, black doesn't seem to have anything unless the knight can come in. I mean, we need to check knight d3, but the bishop on b8 is doing such a great job guarding the diagonal towards the king. But even here, I mean, the white queen from b6 is guarding f2 as well. Everything seems to be guarded. Even if we take
Right.
on f6, I just realized that f2 will still be guarded. So this
Yeah.
just looks like nothing for black. But I was wondering another thing. What if we capture on h4 immediately without giving the check on d1?
Let's have a look. So let's keep this here, and pawn takes h4. Very good point, because if you trade now, knight takes d7, and this pawn on b6 is defended as you're attacking the bishop. So you're making a really good point here. So after, let's see here, g takes h4. Yeah, I guess you'll have to resort to taking the pawn b6. And yeah, I guess the same problem applies, that knight is hanging, pawn is hanging. You do have moves like knight e6, but once again, this pawn is getting really strong, and you can even force a trade if you really want to with queen d6, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's always so tough to decide whether we want to. Okay, Alexandra, I think has just
She
captured
took.
on h4, so we might just see this.
Right,
But
wow.
we also see the other thing we see is that the bar did not like taking on h4 one bit.
I love how when we analyze the position, the bar is not
Yeah,
punishing us this badly, and when we see it on the board, the bar just spikes up like it's nothing.
I
Um,
know.
but yeah, queen takes b6 has been played now indeed, and yeah, that's the problem. This pawn is simply unstoppable. You can take a lot of time to, advance this pawn, but it will happen, and it's really difficult to see how black can stop this pawn.
Yeah, Queen b6, I mean, it's not just, it's also hard to see how black will stop this pawn, but even just what is black's next plan? How is she? Okay, first she has to, I guess, defend f6 as well because, and the knight, yeah, more importantly, the knight. But it feels like if f6 falls, the position just collapses because the king will be too weak. I can't see that king surviving. And I actually, Anamaya, I did take a step back
Hmm.
to look at the previous position because I wasn't sure what should Alexandra have done. And
Hmm.
according to the engines, the move instead of capturing on h4 was queen e6. But it's,
Wow.
I mean, from a human, I see that the engine says it's the best move, but I'm yet to understand why.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I guess you're defending the pawn on b6, which makes it more difficult for white to push the pawn on a2. So yeah, at least white doesn't have the passed pawn, but at the same time, this knight is still under attack. And I guess the one thing that we should consider is what happens after knight to g6,
Yeah, I just
because
looked at
yeah.
that. Knight g6. So the problem for black is not just this
Hmm.
queen e6, not obvious, but after knight g6, you again have to find an only move, and that's knight e7. So
Wow.
I don't think we can be too critical of Alexandra. I mean, this does not look obvious one bit to me, and it's still, I mean, and I'm not even clear why is this the best. White is still better, but it was the best defense, at least according to the engine.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense in the sense that you want to move the king to the seventh rank. So
Yeah.
97 is the only move that really covers the seventh rank without trading queens. And at the same time, you're making sure the b6 pawn is
Hmm.
defended. So I guess this is the way to really make use of the fact that the knight, it has no squares left, it's trapped. And because of that, you have the time to play moves like knight d7 and queen e6 before that. So um,
Yeah, maybe
yeah.
you're right. Actually, maybe queen e6 was the harder move to find of the sequence. Maybe knight d7 actually is very logical, mostly to defend the seventh rank.
Yeah, I guess when you
queen
have the
e6.
move Queen e6 already played, 97 comes naturally. But
Yeah.
without all of this, 97 just doesn't come up obviously. So yeah, Queen e6, it's a really tough move to make because you want to get rid of this knight as soon as possible and have an equal material again. But yeah, it's not the best move, and queen takes b6. All of a sudden, black is in huge trouble as a knight and the pawn are hanging. And after knight e6, we were talking about this briefly. I have a feeling that queen d6 might be really annoying to deal with.
Mhm.
Apparently the engine is not too pleased with my move. So that's rather surprising to see because I assume that once the queens are off the board, this pawn becomes really strong, and the only one winning here, I mean, can be white. So
Yeah, I also like your idea. Maybe white is not in a rush. Maybe white can
right.
trade queens when she wants. Um, what if we just push immediately? What if we just start with a4?
Oh yeah, right. Because the knight is
Mm.
defended by the queen, so the queen cannot capture, and yeah, the queen of b6 is looking right at the knight on e6. So indeed, you can simply push the pawn, and that actually makes me realize that this pawn is
Mm.
unstoppable right now. a5, a6, a7, and I'm not sure how black can stop this.
Yeah, I mean the because our queen on b6 is such a great supporter for this passed pawn, and black has all these issues with the undefended pieces. I'm to be honest, this position I'm even surprised that it's not more winning for white. I'm surprised the bar isn't, all the way. But
Right.
actually, knight e6 has been played in the game, and once again we see the bar now is going on.
Yeah, I'm not sure why when we analyze it, it's not the same, but yeah, it seems like 96. I mean, it's the one of the very few moves that still tries to keep the position together. But as you mentioned, the move a4 seems to be crashing. And will Tan Zhongyi play this move? We'll
I
have to see.
I mean, it does look crushing. It also looks completely natural to me, I have to
Mm-hmm.
say. The material is suddenly even, she did give back the piece, and your one asset in the position is that a pawn, and you can push it. So why not? I expect actually a4 to be played quite fast, and I'm not sure, to be honest, if Alexandra will even make it to move 40. I think we're suddenly nearing the end quite rapidly here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And
There
I
it
was
is.
I was seeing her reaching out for the
Yeah.
pawn. She was looking at it. I could see from her face that she wants to play a4, and she does it. Tan Zhongyi plays the move a4, and now it's the question: is there any way that Alexandra can stop this pawn? I am failing to see it.
Yeah, I'm also failing to see it. It suddenly happened so, I mean, chess can be so cruel sometimes, and don't get me wrong, I think Tanzhongyi is on the verge of winning this game. I think I know I said, I think she's winning out of the opening, but I really failed to see how much counterplay there was for
Mm-hmm.
black, and I'm really impressed by the way that Goryachkina showed it. But here, I really think this is it's just the end, and I am now 100% sure that Tan will win from here on out, and I think she will be the deserving winner of this match. I think she was the only one who ever managed to apply any pressure on Alexandra, and she played incredibly well. She handled the clock incredibly well. So I think it will be a thoroughly deserved victory. But on the other hand, you got to feel for Alexandra, who after making this getting shocked in the opening by this c5 move by white, she did such a great job finding the most resilient defense at every turn. And just when she was so close to, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so close to being back in the game with a fighting chance, I think that what was, I think, taking on h4, which it seems so human, right? To just
Mm-hmm.
take the piece. Um, Yeah, that was suddenly just the decisive mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's crazy to see that Alexandra had such a dominating performance in her first match against Alexandra Kostenyuk. And meanwhile, Tan Jung-gi was struggling a little bit against Katerina Lagno. Katerina Lagno had such a great performance, and she was the only one putting pressure in the games, really. So ever since the tiebreaks, Tan Jung-gi has showed fantastic resilience and great performance overall. So at the end of the day, I really think seeing her performance ever since the tiebreaks, it's more than deserved.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, Alexandra has just played King F7. I see
Mm-hmm.
GSL on YouTube is saying resignation is imminent. I think she will play until move 40 because she's so low on time. She's under 4 minutes now that you sort of just make moves anyway because you don't have enough time, I think, even to psychologically process, what's been happening. And I mean, let's face it, this is a devastating moment for Alexandra Goryachkina, who was the favorite, the rating favorite of the whole candidates tournament. She wanted, of course, to get the chance to challenge Ju Wenjun for the world women's world champion title, and she knows that she's about to be knocked out, and then you have to wait for the next cycle. That takes a couple of years. The whole qualifying process is quite grueling, so it's just um, for a player like Goryachkina, who's the strongest active, let's say, woman player in the world, who Yifan is not so active anymore. It's just a heartbreaking moment for her right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And yeah, this is the current position after King of Seven. This pawn is simply advancing, and Tan Shunki is taking her time, but A5 seems like the right move right now. And this pawn is simply moving forward. You have to move it carefully though, because once you get to A7, you need to have a clear plan of promoting, because once the pawn gets to A7, Queen D5 can be played, and that may make things a little bit more difficult because all of a sudden, yeah, the promotion square is blocked, and since the bishop is on B8, you cannot really play moves like Queen B8. So there's still some work that needs to be done, but obviously, with the amount of time Tan Zhongyi has, even if she had just a few minutes left, I think she could still find the win here.
Absolutely. Let's just try and find a win with her. So let's go A5 because right now the pawn
Yeah.
is under attack since the knight is defended. And already, I mean, I thought A5 was the obvious move.
I think the engine just needs some time to evaluate it, but I'm pretty sure A5 is the only move because the pawn was under attack now that the king is defending the knight. So
Mhm.
A5. What can black possibly play here? Let's assume queen. I mean, I want to play some moves, but once I play Queen D5, there's always Queen B7 ideas.
I see
It's
that
really hard to make even a one move here.
Yeah, I see that there was a comment highlighted. I don't know. I think that's from the YouTube chat. Whether black can try E3 at the right moment. So I like that because black has to look for active counterplay. The question is just what is the right moment?
Yeah, I think the problem is that after a move like e3, white wants to take with the pawn. I mean, I guess you can still take with the queen, but let's say pawn takes, and after queen d1
Hmm.
check, king h2, this bishop is covering this diagonal so
Hmm.
well, and it's hard to see how this knight can join the attack, because if the knight would be on f1, it's a complete different story. But to get there, black needs to play knight g5, knight e4, knight g3, or knight d2 just to make sure that you're safe. But that is a lot of moves, and you don't have any sort of time for that. It will be very easy for white to stop this, and I think meanwhile you can also just simply push the pawn and get another
Yeah.
queen. So it's a really interesting idea, but it takes so much time to get anything out of the position. And at the same time, white's pieces are placed phenomenally.
We also have another suggestion by a certain Alessia, who's wondering what's Queen A7 instead of A5.
Ooh, interesting suggestion. You want to trade queens indeed, but what is concerning me a little bit about White's position is that Black's king is super close. So it's easier for Black to join the queen side, and it will be much faster than White's king. So maybe this is still winning, but it will take a bit more time. So after the queen trade, you'll have to play very precisely here to win. And it seems like Black can easily jump to the queen side, and White will have a hard time defending that pawn, I think.
Yeah, it's. I think it's always tempting, like it was earlier, to get the
Yeah.
queens off and just run the pawn, but it also involves so much calculation because imagine you suddenly lose your a pawn. This reminds me of the second game that I was commentating with Tatev, where Tan Zhongyi was pressing for the whole game, not the whole game. She was under some pressure from the opening, but from the middle game, she was the only one pressing. And in the very end, like she was defending this pawn and getting a pawn down, which was just a straightforward draw. But still, you're like, how the hell did I end up from what I had to being a pawn down in a pawn ending? And yeah, Tan Zhongyi, she has just indeed pushed the pawn to a5. That pawn is now 3 squares away from queen in. Alexandra also only has 3 minutes left on the clock. Remember, she still has to make 6 moves. She will try the defense, I think you suggested, by bringing the queen to d5
Yeah,
at some point.
at some point.
Okay, what do you even start with? Do
Yeah,
you
it's
want
so hard to make
It's
a
so hard
move.
to make any move, yeah.
Let's put things into perspective. So if queen d5, the thing you need to be careful with here is after a6, let's make a random move. Do not play queen b7. As much as it's tempting and you're one square away from promotion, knight c5 and goodbye pawn, you don't have any sort of check with the bishop or a way to make things tricky, because this pawn is simply lost. And you can try a move like bishop here, but this should be holdable as all the pawns are on the one side, and that is beneficial for the knight. The knight can easily defend this position. So for that reason, you have to be careful. And I see that Alexandra played move knight d4, which I really like, actually. I mean, it's obvious that Black has a lost position, but this is still keeping some threats in the position. Knight e2, queen d1 check, and all of a sudden there are some threats
Yeah.
on the king.
Some serious threats, like a checkmate. A checkmate there.
Yeah. Yeah, and what do you do against
Um,
it?
Yeah, so let's see, because I don't see an obvious way to take knight e2 out of the position. I
King
mean,
of
queen,
one.
yeah, and then queen f1, I'd be terrified that suddenly
Yeah.
some knight somewhere in queen d.
Knight c2.
Yeah, I was even looking at knight f3. I don't think it works, but suddenly there's so many things that we need to watch out for.
Yeah.
Okay, queen b2 is probably a safer way to keep an eye on e2, but I don't really want to go back unless I have to. Okay, what if I push a6?
Let's have a look. Knight e2,
Yeah.
king h2, and the problem is queen d1.
Yeah,
The threat is queen g1. You can actually push.
that's what I was wondering, if I can finally push that f pawn. Okay, let's say I don't know if it makes it. Let's say f3.
Can we take? I mean, you're at least defending g1.
Yeah, because my idea was after takes on if you take on f3, am I in time to just go a7, a8?
Ooh. Actually, there's no threat here, which is crazy. So I guess a7 works.
But then, so yeah, so you take on g2, and I can't just recapture, right? Like, everything is under control, no?
I guess you can capture?
Because
because g1
No,
is
I
defended,
can't.
or is there queen d5 check or knight f4? Ugh.
Knight f4 is covered by the bishop.
Right.
But yeah, queen d5. Okay, let's go back because I thought because queen h1 is another big threat. But
How
maybe
about
we
queen
can
b7?
yeah, queen b7 and then take, yeah?
Then we take, yeah, and then it's safe. It's
Yeah.
crazy that the queen and the bishop are covering everything, but this looks fine.
Yeah, this looks convincing. So maybe Tan can just say, okay, I'll give you knight d2 and I'll give you queen d1. And she
Yeah.
still has plenty of time to calculate. It just dropped under 25 minutes. It looks clean. I mean, you have to be 100% sure that everything is under control, which, in the game, that's not something like you just want to push your a pawn. You just want your opponent to resign. You don't want to be faced with suddenly getting checkmated threats. But it looked to us that everything is under control.
Yeah, precisely so. And what is also interesting, I'm just seeing in the chat as well. Can we actually try to go for a trade here with queens? Because now that the
Yeah.
knight is on d4, so for example, queen c7, and
Mhm.
after takes, you cannot really defend the light squares. And if you have to defend the dark square, then I'll just reinforce it with my bishop, and that's it. So this
That
may
looks
also just work out.
Yeah, this looks also very clean. I think did I say queen? Very clean. I think Tan Zhongyi basically has a choice here to go out, in this positional way, trade queens, get black to sack the knight and then win the endgame with the extra piece, or to go out with a bang, just push the pawn, say, you're not checkmating me, I'm gonna get a new queen. I
Mm-hmm.
think both are winning. One involves, taking a tiny bit more risk, allowing all the black pieces in. Um, but I think both just seem winning.
Yeah, we'll see which one she decides to play here. Let's have a look after queen c7. Also, the problem is, of course, I mean, you can try to not trade and play king e6 to come
Mhm.
closer, but yeah, you don't really have to trade. You can still go for a6,
A6, yeah.
but you can, I guess, just I think you're still in time. Actually, king d7, king c. Yeah, you go really fast to b7, so trading will maybe not help as much. And after a6, I guess the same issue here is that queen d1 is not good enough. It's a bit more difficult. I do have to admit that, but I think the fun way to finish things off here is queen d6, forcing the trade,
Mhm.
sacrificing the bishop, and the pawn is unstoppable.
That's very nice.
So I guess the most safe way is queen c7, but I would love to see a6 just to keep things so sharp and just show that you don't have anything with your move knight d4. It looks terrifying, but there's nothing going on.
Yeah, and Tan Zhongyi, she has been taking her time now. I think this is really, the last moment where she has to do that. She has to either figure out that there is no mate after 92 queen d1, or she has to figure out that the endgame is really winning. Maybe we can look at queen c7 again and just see how we get black to give up the knight. So let's start with just a queen trade. So queen takes c7.
Okay.
And
Yeah. It's hard to bring the knight to a nice square.
I know. I mean, okay, let's say knight b5, because the knight will have to give itself up on a7 anyway. So no, not a6. Oh my goodness. Yeah, bishop b8, I guess. So
Yeah, bishop b8. Yeah, you're simply promoting. Is there any way black has some counterplay here? I mean, you can activate the king, I guess, but after
you know,
a6.
I was thinking, I don't think it matters. I think white would probably be winning anyway, but On top of everything else, the H8 square is a dark square, which is helpful to know that even if black manages to exchange, our f pawn and our g pawn, it will still be enough to be winning. So that's helpful to realize as white too. I think if I was playing white, that would make me a lot more comfortable in the knowledge that I'm winning.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, king e6, a6, and the pawn is just unstoppable, and it doesn't look like black has any sort of chances to trade pawns indeed, and try to find a way to equalize it. It's simply impossible. So yeah, we'll have to see what Tan Zhongyi will play here. I'm really curious because all of those lines look really good, and it almost feels like there's no way you can mess up here since all of the logical moves are winning.
I
So
know.
yeah.
It's sometimes you're just spoiled for choice, and it's like if you have too many winning lines to decide between, sometimes it could be more confusing than anything because you're like, okay, this line looks winning, but this other line also looks winning. Let me make sure, that I find the most uh, secure one, because I think especially, okay, in my experience, and again, these players are playing in a completely different league, but I've had these situations where I feel like, okay, that line is winning and that line is also winning, I think. But then suddenly you get some doubts. You think, what if in the line that I go for, what if I missed something there? And I am feeling pretty sure that the other one is winning. And you just want to be so sure that you pick the one that is really definitely winning. So I think she might go for Queen C7 just to play it safe. But what do you think?
I fully agree. I mean, I've often been told to not complicate things too much. But okay, there's also a downside to not complicating things, that you make it so simple that all of a sudden
Mhm.
your opponent has a defense. But as we saw in the lines, Queen C7 seems okay. The king is too far away. The knight is not in time to defend. And if you're able to defend on a dark square, this bishop will be able to cover that and help the pawn to promote. So this bishop is in a really good spot, and it's so crazy to think that the bishop got all the way to b8, and now Queen c7 has been played. Very safe move, and yeah, this pawn is simply unstoppable.
Absolutely. By the way, thank you so much, Nicola, for the 1,000 bits. I think that probably a6 would end the game sooner and more spectacularly. But this one is just safer, and I think in this situation we cannot blame the players for going for safety first. Of course, we all love seeing nice and flashy finishes, but that's not what's on her mind.
Yeah, and King E8 is an interesting move because as we were discussing earlier, after a move like A6, Knight E2, and King H2, all of a sudden Queen D1 becomes really dangerous. Are you okay? Okay, we'll take over for a moment. But yeah, this goes to show that you don't have this move Queen D6 check anymore. And suddenly Queen G1 is a huge threat, so you'll have to keep giving checks. And that's why you cannot afford to play this anymore. And we see indeed Tan Zhongyi has played Queen C4, stopping Knight E2 altogether. Are you okay?
Sorry, I got something in my throat. I
Oh
will
no.
survive. Oh my goodness, I'm
Take it
so sorry.
easy. No, don't worry. Don't worry. You're very brave. I'll take it over you. Don't worry. But yeah, Queen C4 has been played, and simply stopping that knight E2 check altogether. Queen B7 now on the board, accepting that this knight will be captured. And then the bishop will fall, but this should simply be lost. I mean, Queen takes D4, you can capture that bishop, but pawn on F6 will be hanging, and also E4 is hanging, by the way. Actually, after Queen takes D4, what is interesting is that you can give a check first, and you take with check on B8. So maybe that's not so clear, actually. So you have to think of a better move there. than simply capturing. It's crazy to me how resourceful Alexandra is. And yeah, you have to play really precise here. It's crazy.
Anna Maria, I think I'm back back from the dead. Oh, I got
Oh no.
I got something caught in my throat, but
Oh.
I'll survive. But yeah, I mean, it's really, really incredible just how resourceful, Alexandra is.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, like every word,
It's fine.
every word when it's just like scratching in your throat, you're like,
Yeah. Yeah, that's really annoying, and you're really brave for still working today and giving commentary to the audience while you're not feeling 100%.
well, thank you. I appreciate. Also, Nicola, I appreciate the 1,000 bits. Goodness. No, okay. So, yeah, I don't know. Is Tan going to regret? That she didn't go for the flashy, but she finds Queen G8.
Yeah, right. This is forcing the queen exchange. I'm curious if there is something better because now the king is getting really close to that pawn on a5, and it should still be winning, of course, but yeah, it's gonna take some time, I think. So let's see, where is this king heading to? Because king c8 is queen e8 checkmate. Let's scratch off the move king c8 off the options.
Mhm.
Oh, I think I see the problem. King c6 and now queen takes f6. You're forking the knight and the king. You're maybe not. Oh, actually, queen c4 is more clean. Queen c4 is more clean because there was still a
And there's
defense.
the
There it
resignation.
is.
Wow.
Wow. Tan Zhongyi has won Pool B, everyone. She finishes off this match with a banger of a game. She wins with 2.5, 1.5, no tie breaks needed. That's it. She will be playing Lei Tingjie in the finals for who will be the opponent in the World Championship.
Absolutely. Congratulations to Tan Zhongyi. I think, she doesn't show much emotion. We don't see a fist bump. We don't see any big celebrations. But I think you could see, the relief and a small smile. On the other hand, we see Alexandra walking away from the board. For her, this is really a brutal moment. But I think Tan Zhongyi, we talked about it a bit earlier. I think she was under pressure maybe against Katerina Lagno, but in this match, it's a thoroughly deserved victory. Alessia is saying, see you not tomorrow. Indeed, no tiebreak tomorrow, and what a game we just witnessed.
Yeah, Fiona, we're having a tough time with the broadcast because my neighbors are also drilling the wall.
I think they finished just in time, the drilling, the coughing. So I think we're finishing this, our gratitude to Tan Zhongyi for ending the broadcast here. It's been a challenging day, but I think we got through it all fine, and we see there the final result. Tan Zhongyi taking the match 2.5, 1.5, as Anamaya mentioned, setting up a final against her compatriot Lei Tingjie, and the winner of that I will go on to challenge to Wenjun. So we already know that the next world champion, she will come from China. What a dominating display it has been from their players. Really, really impressive. And I think all that's left for us now is to say thank you to all of you who have been watching us throughout this tournament. I hope you enjoyed. Our coverage. Remember, there's plenty more events coming. Anamaya, it's also been a huge pleasure doing commentary with you.
Likewise.
I hope we'll be back to do more of this together.
Hopefully we'll be more smooth. But it was definitely a blast, Fiona. Thank you so much. And thank you for making it despite not feeling 100%.
No, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. It's more, I think I'm fine. It's just the throat has been causing me some problems in the end. But yeah, that's all from us for today. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure being your host and seeing you throughout this event. We are signing off for now, but thank you so much for watching. The next featured event on this channel will be Hikaru Nakamura against Levon Aronian. That's a huge game coming up in the quarter finals of the Speed Chess Championship. So that's on Monday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, 9 p.m. No, sorry. Yeah, 12 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Central European. You wouldn't want to miss it. That's all from us. Thank you so much for watching, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. Take care. See you soon. Bye bye.
See you.